Hello and welcome to Newsroom. We're coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg. I'm Shante Yankis. I'm not alone. Joining me today with your sporting highlights, Kendall Makamata. You good, Kendall?
Yeah, very good. How are you doing?
I'm good, I'm good.
Good morning to you at home as well.
Let's start with our question of the day. Today we're asking you, of course, surrounding Eskom's release of their 2017 financial results. What are your views? Let's have a look at some of the tweets that have been coming in already.
Yeah, lots of comments from everybody. People are also bringing the Eastern Cape matter as well. Lechasa Butler Mulla says, you know what, should have released the report a long time ago. Machela Koko should be removed.
I don't know, he maintains his innocence. Nazim tagging both of us here saying, I'm waiting for that release. Hashtag Eskom. And we're also asking who is responsible for managing the water crisis in the Western Cape, particularly in Cape Town. And this is our poll today. Is the water crisis in Cape Town being used as a political tool?
Well, we've got 276 votes in, Shante, and 14% say no, but an overwhelming majority of 86% say absolutely it is being used as a tool politically. Yeah,
it's quite confusing with the likes of Patricia de Lille, and then we've also seen Esidimeni being addressing the residents, and now Novula Mokanyane is also having a say. Let's have a look at the comments behind those numbers. Nazim says everything is being politicized in South Africa, so I'm not surprised.
Yes, it's the South African way, is it not? Nazim Katlego comes in with, after Helen Zille refused national government's intervention, yes, unfortunately people are suffering because of inexperienced, ignorant Helen Zille, according to Katlego KG.
Continue to send us your comments behind our question and the poll of today. But before we kick things off, what's happening in our sports?
Well, I've got exactly the same thing. We thought we'd bring you a poll on this matter because it seems as if Alistair Coetzee has let the cat out the bag and airing dirty laundry in public. We want to find out from you who's to blame for the Springboks' poor form. Is it A, Uriru and Saru, or B, Alistair Coetzee and staff?
Let's have a look at those comments there. Over 102 votes coming in. Nazim says, if we're going to point fingers, we will never fix anything in all the sports in South Africa.
Nazim, you're so on point. You're making a lot of sense today. 53% though of other respondents saying it's Uriru and his teammates. On the Exco, Siafana says Uriru and Saru, I blame them about the poor performance of the Springboks. Says Siafana.
No, we're just going to have to wait and see. Well, very interesting morning as we are set to cross over to live Esidimeni. Also, Cyril Ramaphosa is also set to speak at NEDLAC and that Eskom inquiry. For now, though, let's have a look at your headlines. Eskom is expected to release its delayed financial results today. Gauteng Premier David Makura and Finance MEC Barbara Creasy are both expected to testify when the Esidimeni arbitration hearings resume in Parktown, Johannesburg today. A Gauteng police task team is looking into the allegations of sexual abuse at a Boksburg school in Gauteng. And standing by with all your sporting highlights is Kendall Makamate. Welcome back, Kendall. Some of us that don't work on Mondays, but take us through some of our sporting highlights for today.
A very good morning to you too, Shante. It really is good to be back and good to be bringing you some interesting news from the world of sports. Good morning to you. This is what else we've got for you for today.
If they want to be as great as me, that's the secret. So just focus, just work hard.
Retired sprint legend Usain Bolt stops by a school in Roodepoort, Johannesburg and leaves a motivational pearl for youngsters to focus on.
Out! Straight to cover.
Titans, colossal in this year's Momentum One Day Cup, take the Warriors on tonight in the first semi-final of the season. Date for the middleweight world title rematch between Gennady Golovkin and Saul Canelo Alvarez was announced for the fight due on the 5th of May. All this in more detail we've got for you for later on. We'll also be looking at what's happening tomorrow night in the PSL. Be sure to stick around as Shante has got the news.
Thank you very much, Kendall. Having a look at your top story at 9 o'clock, Eskom is expected to release its delayed financial results today. This comes after the power utility was put under pressure to meet the listing requirements of the JSE or face its debt being suspended from trade. The cash-strapped power utility has been through weeks of drama that saw government intervene by appointing a new board and acting CEO. Investigations into allegations of corruption are also ongoing. On Friday, Moody's downgraded Eskom's credit rating. Moody's says it is concerned with Eskom's deteriorating liquidity and the ability of government to provide direct equity support to the power utility.
The concerns that were raised by the rating agencies last year still remain. These are primarily issues around irregular expenditure, issues around Eskom's liquidity, and also the lapses in corporate governance. So it comes as no surprise that Moody's reacted the way they did on Friday, but we can say to the market at the moment that we now have a new board and we also have an interim CEO. In due course, the market, both locally and international, will begin to see some changes so that we can address those particular issues that were raised.
Public Enterprises Minister Lynn Brown and the leaders of various state-owned companies will appear before Parliamentary Committee today to discuss the progress made in improving governance at the SOCs. Appearing before the committee will be the board chairpersons, CEOs and chief financial officers of Transnet, Alex Denel, SA Express and Safcom. Former CEO of Prasa Passenger Agency, Lucky Montana, is also expected to give evidence in the state capture inquiry. Eskom will not appear today as it is releasing its interim financial results. Parliament says 29 committees are expected to sit this week. The Public Enterprises Minister Lynn Brown, her deputy Ben Martins, Steinhoff International and former Prasa CEO Lucky Montana are among those who will be appearing before committees this week. Martins last year vehemently denied allegations from Eskom's former head of legal, Suzanne Daniels. He was present at a meeting with a member of the Gupta family at the centre of allegations of state capture at the utility and President Jacob Zuma's son Duduzane. Well, for more on the story, we are now joined by SACP National Spokesperson, Mr. Alex Mashilo. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Essentially, as the SACP, how do you interpret the proceedings so far?
In the first place, the SACP called for this inquiry to take place. We want to respect it. We will look at the report of the inquiry once it is concluded and decide on what it calls for insofar as our responsibilities as the party are concerned. We note that our Central Committee member, Ben Martins, will be appearing at the inquiry tomorrow. We have made our position very clearly that should any incontrovertible evidence emerge from this process, we will take leadership and take decisive action.
Well, there are revelations coming out of the Eskom inquiry that, of course, have implicated one of your senior members there, Mr. Ben Martins, and him having admitted that he has met with the Gupta family. Has the SACP been able to sit down with Mr. Martins to hear his side of the story?
We don't want to start a new process because, if you will recall, it is the SACP that called for this process. We will be following the hearing closely tomorrow when he is appearing to hear his side of the story. We will read the report that will be compiled by the committee and take matters from there.
So essentially you have not heard Mr. Martin's side of the story from the SACP?
We received a statement that Comrade Ben prepared for the committee. We looked at that statement. It was also provided to the party. And we take note of the fact that he has not appeared before the committee. And we also take note of the fact that the committee has not concluded its work. In fact, in its letter of invitation to Ben Martins to come and present his side of the story, the committee goes on to say that he must note that Lucky Montana will be appearing. It is speculated that he might implicate Martins in his submissions and that Martins has to take note of that, and that the issues, should that happen, will also arise when Martins appear at the committee.
Now, the SACP has had a very strong stance on state capture and corruption and fraud. Has Mr. Martins in any way brought the party into disrepute?
If it is found that he was involved in wrongdoing, definitely he would have brought the party into this report, and the party will step forward and take decisive action.
And in 2017, your year-end statement, the SACP also expressed its disappointment with law agencies and enforcement agencies. What exactly is the NPA and the Hawks, the police, not doing what they should be?
Look, there was a process by the former public protector to investigate state of capture. As part of the remedial action, the report of the former public protector, it's very clear that there were matters that looked criminal in nature, and those matters were referred to the law enforcement agencies. Since the report was unveiled publicly, we have not had anything from law enforcement agency. On the contrary, we have seen countries such as the United Kingdom and the United States step forward and take actions on wrongdoing committed in South Africa, but we have not had anything from the South African authorities up until now in January 2018. And we have noted that the Hawks have been conducting some work that indicates some hope. We are very vigilant as to what will happen to any evidence that will be uncovered in that particular process. We have also noted preservation orders by the National Prosecuting Authority. We are looking forward as to where those particular cases will end. But look at this and look at the time when the former public protector Thuli Madonsela released her report entitled The State of Capture.
Now, analysts say that the SACP is fully compromised, and the only way that the party will be able to somewhat redeem itself if it does a possible recall of all ministers and deputy ministers in Zuma's cabinet to come out clean with regards to any links to the Guptas. What is your view on this?
We don't agree. We are not compromised at all. What will happen is, in terms of the universal rule of justice, audi alteram partem, which means hear the other side of the story. Once the other side of the story is heard and conclusions are reached from credible processes, that's when we will look at those reports and take decisive action. At this moment, we have campaigned for this government. We cannot recall people from government who are performing well and who are serving our nation. Otherwise, there will be no government. And when we recall people, as soon as allegations come up against them, we respect the rule of law.
Indeed. Now, with regards to the ongoing inquiry underway, what essentially would be the likely outcome from the SACP?
We want to know what happened to our state-owned enterprises. Eskom is in crisis, it is insolvent. The state guaranteed billions of rents to Eskom. The SABC, we know what has happened there. If you compare the SABC to the thriving environment that MultiChoice enjoys, including through its relationships and contracts with the SABC. We are not happy about that. Transnet is in crisis. PetroSA is in crisis. Our strategic fuel reserves have been sold under mysterious circumstances with, discounts that are, in our view, unjustifiable. The list goes on. We cannot have this road. It has to come to an end. Law enforcement agencies, Parliament, the African National Congress, the SACP, COSATU, SANCO have got to play their role to save this country. Otherwise, we are going down.
Thank you very much for joining us here in the studio. That was SACP National Spokesperson, Mr. Alex Mashilo. Moving on, Gauteng Premier David Makhura and his Finance MEC Barbara Creasy are both expected to testify when the Esidimeni arbitration hearings resume in Parktown, Johannesburg today. Creasy will be questioned on the assertions of officials from the Provincial Health Department that the termination of its contract with Life Esidimeni was due to budgetary constraints. Meanwhile, the DA in Gauteng has opened a missing persons case for 62 Life Esidimeni patients whose whereabouts are still unknown. The patients were part of a group of psychiatric patients that were discharged from Life Esidimeni 2 years ago. The hearings, which are likely to draw to a close this week, seek to provide family members with closure and redress. Gauteng Premier David Makhura is also expected to appear either later today or tomorrow. The other two remaining witnesses also expected to give evidence before proceedings conclude are Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi as well as current Gauteng Health MEC Gwen Ramaphosa. The Minister of Water and Sanitation, Nomvula Mokonyane, has been summoned to Parliament to brief members as well as all South Africans on her department's interventions to resolve the drought crisis in parts of the country. Meanwhile, in Cape Town, store shelves are running empty as panicked consumers have started stockpiling water in anticipation of Day Zero.
It's become a common sight in Cape Town. Residents queuing to refill containers with water. With Day Zero looming large, the levels of concern and panic are palpable. Owners say sales have started skyrocketing over the past 6 months.
People are scared that there's not going to be water come Day Zero, and they are stockpiling. But we've got a limit of 25 litres per person per day, or per family per day, just to let everybody at least have some water. There's no point in giving one person 300-400 litres and the next person is not going to get help. So we try and satisfy the demand for everyone.
Residents have been urged to ensure that necessary care is taken with storing drinking water safely.
There's always going to be a risk of that water being contaminated, even if we're taken from a water source which has been treated. So if you're going to store water, make sure that, first of all, the containers you use are containers which are very clean. Secondly, is that the water is covered or the risk of it getting contaminated with bacteria or exposed to environment is reduced as best as possible.
Water tank suppliers are meanwhile battling to keep up with demand as Cape Townians scramble to prepare for water storage.
I'm very concerned with the demand that there is. I don't think everybody's going to end up with tanks. There's going to be a lot of people that's going to struggle and suffer and have to find a way to get water. There are people that are transporting water as well to help other people, but I don't see how everybody's going to be making it in time.
Concern is also mounting for the water needs of animals when the taps run dry. Over 300 animals are cared for here. Water aid has been streaming in following a Facebook appeal. The Cape of Good Hope's SPCA, meanwhile, says it will be launching an emergency drought relief campaign to educate staff and take care of animals in preparation for Day Zero. Vanessa Puna, SABC News, Cape Town.
Well, we are running a poll this morning and we're asking you, is the water crisis in the Western Cape being used as a political tool? 86% of you are saying yes, just well into the half hour. 14% of you are saying no, with just over 280 votes coming in. Let's have a look at some of the tweets there. Michael says, yes, it is. A few days back during a certain march in Cape Town, some people blaming government, the ANC. I didn't know that the ANC were responsible for rain we get, and then they decide who gets it. This is the time to find solutions, and the Western Cape is under at our DA. Trained Eye says it seems the problem is everybody's but the DA, all that time fighting Zuma and they forgot to govern. Continue to send us your tweets via our poll as well as our question for today. Well, moving on, the EFF says it's ready to go to the country's highest court in appealing yesterday's decision by the Western Cape High Court to reverse an earlier decision that Parliament could not suspend EFF MPs or dock their salaries. Well, this follows EFF's part in the chaos at President Jacob Zuma's 2014 State of the Nation address in Parliament. They were demanding that he pay back the money for the upgrade of his Nkandla homestead. In 2014, Judge Dennis Davis granted the EFF an interim order pending the determination of issues relating to fairness and procedures in the decision by Parliament's Powers and Privileges Committee to suspend them and dock their pay. Well, the late jazz legend Hugh Masekela will be buried today at a private funeral for family and close friends as per his final wish. Tributes in honour continue to attract friends and fans. Masekela passed away last Tuesday following a long battle with prostate cancer. He died at age 78.
Hugh Masekela's music will forever inspire generations to come. a man who's left an indelible mark on his fans. Memorial sites like this one gives fans the opportunity to pay homage to the larger-than-life figure and leave messages of support.
His music was just for everybody, and his music, his personality came through, his humor especially.
Among the throngs honoring the muso, family friend and former Zambian president Rupiah Banda.
Very much ahead of our time, introduced jazz, African jazz, in a manner that it competed with the rest of the world.
For many, Masekela's music evokes heartwarming childhood memories.
All we had was music anyway, so it's the physical manifestation that is gone, but their soul stays with us.
Hugh Masekela did set us off in telling our story, and he kept on telling us, tell the African story. It's a great story.
The Hugh Masekela Heritage Park will remain open to the public until Thursday. Gillian Pillay, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, South Africa is gearing up to host the 10th BRICS Leaders Summit in Sandton in July. The gathering will bring together leaders of Brazil, India, China, Russia and South Africa.
Addressing the BRICS stakeholder meeting in Pretoria, the Deputy Director General at the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, Professor Anil Suklal, says South Africa will benefit immensely from hosting the 10th BRICS Summit.
So South Africa has this opportunity to showcase not only amongst our BRICS partners, but to the global community, the positive cooperation that we enjoy within BRICS and its impact not only amongst BRICS countries, but its impact globally, addressing the key challenges we face as countries of the South in terms of our developmental challenges, in terms of growing our economy, in terms of addressing issues of poverty and unemployment.
Meanwhile, the BRICS member states have strongly criticized the move by the U.S. government to impose high import tariffs.
These protectionist measures can only hurt the global economy. We understand that the positive impacts of globalization has not percolated down to the poorest, and we need to address that. Globalization is not negative, it's not bad for the international community, but we must ensure that the benefits of globalization benefits the poorest of the poor.
Government is to engage various policy think tanks, academic institutions and civil society organizations to solicit input on how to maximize South Africa's socio-economic gains during the July BRICS Leaders Summit.
Well, South Africa's Minister for Defence and Military Veterans, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, will make an official visit to Juba, the capital of South Sudan. Well, during her visit, she will meet her South Sudan counterpart, Kawal Mangyang Juk, and sign a memorandum of understanding on cooperation in defence. Sarah Kimani reports.
The minister's visit follows a similar one by the South Sudan's defense minister to South Africa, in which the two countries agreed to work together. During this visit, the two countries will sign a memorandum of understanding on cooperation.
The signing of the memorandum of understanding is of a special importance now that South Sudan has signed a cessation of hostilities agreement and is opening up a new phase of transition from conflict to peace.
The relationship between South Sudan and South Africa dates back to South Sudan's struggle years when the country sought independence from the Sudan. The minister will also deliver a message of South Africa's commitment to seeing long-lasting peace in the world's youngest nation.
The minister will reiterate South Africa's support and active participation in this peace process, not just as a member of the AU, but also as a participant in the IGAD Plus mechanism.
South Africa was appointed by the African Union to support the East African region's bid towards peace in South Sudan. Sarah Kimani, SABC in Juba, South Sudan.
Well, our picture of the day in our social media segment comes from Marang Sechwaya. Very, very necessary hashtag Hugh Masekela Grammy tribute. Of course, such a beautiful picture of Hugh Masekela there smiling. And if there was ever a picture to describe a man and a personality, it is definitely this one. May his beautiful soul rest in peace. Let's have a look at our comment of the day. This one comes from Ulrich J. van Vieren. Fantastic. Congratulations, Lady Smith Black Mambazo, on winning not one, not two, but its 5th Grammy. Amazing that they're recognized internationally every year. They need to also be celebrated more at home, and more music needs to be played on South Africa stations. Hashtag Grammys. And definitely such a good positive news. Also nice to see what South Africa is doing abroad. Back here at home, let's have a look at what's taking place in and around our courts today. We'll start off in KZN. The National Freedom Party leadership battle is expected to play out in the High Court in Pietermaritzburg today. The party now has 2 rival leadership structures, those formally elected and the ad hoc committee appointed by the party's president Zanele Kwamgwaza Msibi. We will be keeping updated on this case as well as other cases before our courts here on Newsroom. For now though, let's take a short break. Do stay tuned, we'll be back.
Rights and recourse tackles constitutional issues.
When South Africa became a constitutional democracy, we had a fairly sound legal system in place requiring the Constitution to guide the direction in which it must go and the way in which it must be refashioned.
The Justice Ministry, the custodian of human rights.
We actually have a plan to come up with a comprehensive review of our human rights instrument.
Advocate dealing with evidence.
Sometimes you have to use a crook to catch a crook. So we expected that the credibility would really be taken to task. You try and consult your witnesses and prepare them as best as you can.
Hashtag Rights with Dumila Mates on legal issues every Sunday at 2 o'clock Central African Time.
Welcome back. Well, Gauteng police are investigating sexual abuse allegations at a Boksburg school in Gauteng. The probe follows videos and pictures of a former principal engaging in sexual acts with learners and staff at a school. Well, parents at the school want more people to be held responsible for the sex scandal.
Angered and feeling let down, these parents and community members want answers. The scandal was laid bare last week after explicit videos of educators and pupils having sex emerged on social media.
All the educators that took part in this whole thing, they need to go because we had enough.
It's statutory rape because they were underage. And it's so wrong. You have to go to jail.
The group, which demanded to be addressed by district education officials, also demanded the immediate removal of some of the implicated teachers.
We are also suspicious that there might not be one person involved in this. That is why I'm saying we depend on your cooperation. So that if you know anybody that's involved in activities such as this one, please come forward.
What we have seen on videos might not be enough of what is the real picture as what is happening. It might be that there are some unrecorded instances where our children are actually prey to these animals or this animal.
In a similar incident last year, 86 primary school learners were allegedly molested by a scholar patroller in Soweto. A 57-year-old man has since been arrested. Well, more teachers at the school are believed to be implicated in sexual acts, and parents and the community want them ousted too. Amid the growing scandal here, calls for a commission of inquiry into all Gauteng schools to determine how widespread the problem is.
We want a thorough investigation to be done into the school. We are of the opinion that this is not only an issue of Reiger Park, this is a bigger issue, it's a national issue.
The community has given the department 7 days to respond to their demands. Criselda Lewis, SABC News, in Reiger Park on Gauteng's East Rand.
Well, speaking earlier on Morning Live, SATSU General Secretary Mgwena Maluleke expressed the union's concern over the incident.
The profession has been shamed by the behavior of that particular principal and many others that we have seen last year. We feel that the dignity of our children has been violated, and therefore this is cause for concern for all of us as professionals. And indeed, we were shocked as an organization. But without being just saying shocked, we are also angered by the fact that we are not seeing a decline in this kind of conduct from our own colleagues that are supposed to be caring for our children. Yes, issuing statements after statement is not going to help us. However, we need to expose this unprofessional behavior in our schools and make sure that we deepen the professional judgment of our teachers and making sure that the environment is conducive for our children to be free to report this kind of acts that are directed to them by their parents, in particular in schools, and so that we are able to root this behavior that is really shaming our profession out.
Now, for more on the story, we are joined from our Pretoria studios is Temikosi Ndlovu, the spokesperson for the South African Council of Educators. A very good morning to Ms. Ndlovu. Thank you very much for joining us. Essentially, what has been your response to this incident?
I think I must indicate that firstly, our response has been that of disappointment, anger, in the fact that these allegations are bringing the profession into disrepute. Parents send their kids to schools to learn with the hope that their kids would interact with their parents at schools who are teachers, who need to protect them at all times, who need to instill in them values that society needs out of the future of our generation. So what happened at that school is quite disappointing, disgusting, and we are taking very stern action as council in addressing this matter. Already yesterday we deployed our investigators into the school. We are expecting a report that will be able to guide us on processes to follow going forward. But we're condemning this kind of behavior in the strongest possible terms.
Now, has the union noticed that incidents such as these are on the increase, or is it only seeming to come to light now because there's more media reports on such incidents?
It is a worrying factor to council, actually, that we have been making a call to society to report such incidents, to report them immediately they get to know about them. We need to appreciate the vigilance of the parents at that school who are taking up the matter, and we're calling on them that as we proceed with our investigations, they must make sure that they avail whoever has information for us to be able to deal with this matter conclusively. These cases, as they emanate, it is a worrying factor to council. That is why we are working at amending our act, because our act has to be amended to allow council to be able to disclose the people who are perpetuating such acts against our learners. And we're hoping that process is on track. And once the act is amended, would be able to inform society who these kinds of people are and how we should avoid making our children get into contact with them. But it is a worrying concern that we still have people that prey on children in that manner. We still have people who are in a position of trust that abuse that position to prey on our children. We're calling on our teachers to be vigilant in defending the integrity of this profession, because obviously all of us are getting painted with the same brush, and it is us as educators who must take charge of the process of protecting the integrity of our profession. We're saying these people who are doing these things must be exposed now and not later.
Now, Mr. Ndlovu, it's quite a worrying issue. We've also seen other incidents that have taken place, such as this, where the teacher has resigned or been fired from a school. A couple of months later has then been rehired or resurfaces at another school. Let's just talk about the use of the sex offender register and how it's actually being used in our education system. Does it need to be somewhat revised?
Basically, our responsibility as council is that once we have dealt with a case, we then need to report that matter to the Department of Social Development, who then enlist the name of that teacher on the Child Protection Register. It is a worrying fact. That is why also we are engaging with provincial departments of education to say we need to work in tandem in ensuring that when a teacher gets dismissed from a certain province, that person does not resurface in another province. We have had engagements, I know, in December. We met with the department officials. We have got the support of the Director General in this regard, and we would be engaging more with provincial departments of education so that we are able to ensure that these people, when they get dismissed, remember, it's not only provincial education departments who are employers. We've got school governing bodies whom we have also agreed we need to interact with them. We've got independent schools that are employing teachers who we need to interact with them also, so that these people don't find a way of hopping from one area to another and continue doing what they're doing. Once we have struck off the teacher from the role, and the only way we can do that is when we get the support of society by reporting these cases, availing every evidence that we need so that we deal with these perpetrators once and for all.
Now, yesterday, community members, in their memorandum of demands that they had handed over to the chief director in the Department of Gauteng here, they mentioned that they would like for call for cameras to be installed in classrooms and in facilities of learning. What are your views on this?
Let me say that's a matter of the departmental issue in terms of providing security in schools. Our census is saying our teachers need to conduct themselves. They don't need to be policed to conduct themselves in a proper manner. But we are calling on our teachers to refrain from such activities and lead by example. Whatever security measures that the department wants to put in place in schools, that would be the responsibility of the department to do.
Indeed. Thank you very much for joining us. That was Timokosi Ndlovu, the spokesperson for the South African Council of Educators, on the backdrop of that horrible incident taking place in Boksburg. Well, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is set to address the NEDLAC Organised Labour School. The annual NEDLAC Organised Labour School takes place under the theme Building Warrior Power to advance good and clean governance to stimulate inclusive economic growth and decent jobs. The Labour School is attended by representatives of Labour Federations COSATU, Medusa and NACTU. Ramaphosa's presentation will focus on how best South Africa can be engineered in its economy in such a way that it begins to benefit the people of our country. Indeed. Let's have a look now at what's taking place front and centre on our newspapers. But before that, of course, Cyril Ramaphosa has just started speaking, so let's cross over to that.
Leaders, be they business, government, NGOs, and labor leaders are looking at this world as a world which should begin crafting a shared future in as many ways as possible. So much as we still live in a fractured world. And our approach should be, we should not accept that, yes, the world is fractured and it must remain like that forever and in a day. We should be saying, we want to change this fractured world. We want to transform this world into a healthy world in which our people will have a shared future. And the project of healing this world and making sure that it does not continue being a fractured world should be an all-inclusive process. It cannot be done by one sector alone. It cannot be done by government alone. That, I think, we've proven over and over again that government cannot do it alone, nor can labor do it on its own. It requires that all key role players in a country, in the economy, should work together to heal this fractured world. The good thing with the World Economic Forum process is that people now have come to accept that it is fractured. In our own country, you will remember that for many years, people never really accepted that we live in a fractured country. It's now been accepted that, yes, we live in a fractured country, and you can look at a variety of areas of life and conclude that, and people have concluded that, yes, it is fractured, something needs to be done. What needs to be done is what we should focus on. How do we correct what needs to be done? At the World Economic Forum, they expressed a renewed confidence in the world economy continuing to grow. They see what they would call green shoots. Various parts of the world are beginning to generate growth, which growth, hopefully, they hope will lead to further growth in a number of other markets. And we need to look at ourselves, at our own economy and our own country, and see whether we are beginning to see those green shoots of growth and what it is that we can do with that. Our presence at the World Economic Forum this time was quite a great attraction to many participants at the World Economic Forum. We were inundated with requests for meetings, requests for engagements, and myself and a number of our cabinet ministers and a number of business people and NGO people were very, very busy engaging, talking, and in some cases even negotiating with a number of role players. And in that process, we were able to hear them say they have renewed confidence in South Africa and are looking forward to investing in our country and also to contribute to employment creation. And I can say that a number of business people who one interacted with kept on saying they are seeing a great light coming out of South Africa, and they've got a number of projects that they want to embark upon for investment purposes, and they're looking forward to engaging with us. And as we correctly told them, we said, you come to South Africa, you have to engage with the key role players, yes, business, government, labor, as well as communities, because that is the makeup of who we are as South Africans. You cannot engage with the one and think that you've done the job and finished. We are a complete entity as South Africans, made up of the various components. Now, what we need to do, therefore, with this renewed interest in our country, this renewed confidence in our country, and this great spirit of hope, great spirit of people looking forward to a better future, we must use 2018 to restore the confidence of South Africans in a shared vision for great progress, a forward movement in the lives of our people. Yes, we want to see transformation, having accepted that we live in a fractured country, but at the same time having accepted that we need to have a shared vision of where we are going. That vision dictates that there must be sharing in anything that is better that will ensue or be yielded by this economy or this process that we are involved in for our people. So therefore, economic transformation is something that must be shared. Progress at a social level must also be shared, and all what we do must be on the basis of sharing. We must convince those who have not yet understood that we cannot grow and sustain an economy that excludes our people, an economy essentially that excludes black people in our country, the majority of whom are African, majority of whom are female. So we need to embark on radical social and economic transformation if we want to create a South Africa where all its citizens, black and white, share equitably in the country's future. This is something that we can no longer run away from. Having come from a past where the economy just worked for the benefit of a minority, now all of us now say it must work for the benefit of all the people of our country. And it is about implementing programs that will de-racialize a number of processes that have been fractured in the past. Ownership patterns, the management processes in our economy, the control processes in our economy, but also inclusivity, where no one in our country ever feels that they are excluded. But that means that people must then be given access. Access must now be open to all. And none of us as South Africans must ever feel that we are excluded from access by virtue of the region we come from, the gender that we represent, the tribal group that we represent, the national group that we represent, the religious affiliation that we have, the age that we have. Nothing must ever exclude any one of us. We must all be included, whether we are disabled or not disabled. We must all be able to participate. Whether you are a business person or a worker, whether you are anything, we all have to be included and have access to the economic benefits that will be yielded by our country. Work is underway to do a number of things that will begin to deal with the structural problems that our economy has. We've always argued that the key problem of our economy is not just symptomatic. It is a structural problem that we are dealing with. So we now need to get down to real business and deal with the structure of our economy. Things such as which international bodies, which you could say are almost neoliberal type of bodies like the IMF, have commented that the structure of our economy is lopsided. It has encouraged concentration of ownership, of control in a few hands. Now, this is what we have always said, but when it is said by a high and mighty organization like that, we all need to sit up and listen if we were not listening to what we were all saying. It therefore means that we've got to begin the process of change at a structural level and change the full structure so that we can end up with a shared vision and a shared outcome which yields benefits for all and a shared future. Now, clearly all this must be done to address the economic legacy of apartheid, but as we do that, we must see great opportunities and forward-looking opportunities as we address that legacy of apartheid. It will create dynamic and great opportunities for us. Rather than look at it as a negative, we need to look at it as a positive because it then gives us the platform through which we can effect real and meaningful change. Now, clearly, in order to transform this economy, a number of things need to happen. As I was saying, all of us need to be involved. I see Labour playing a key role in the restructuring process also of the economy. I think the days where Labour is just a recipient of solutions that comes from either through its legislative process, that come from boards of directors, are gone. Labour has to see itself as a key participant in generating the solutions that must take the country forward. It means that Labour must also be right there, the driving seat. Let me say, I was greatly disappointed by Labour's lack of participation when we were drafting the National Development Plan. When we were drafting the National Development Plan, which was an overriding effort by our government to say, let us craft a future to 2030. And Labour, yes, had a representative, and may I say here, that representative disappeared after some time. But in the further engagement, Labour was a reluctant participant and player. Now I'm raising this so that Labour must be alive to the fact that things that happen in the country have to affect all of us, and Labour must be playing a key and overriding role. And when Labour plays a role in matters that will affect our people as a whole, we're able to get greater wisdom, better ideas, great inputs, and I've always argued, coming from Labour myself, that Labour has always been on the front foot in terms of generating ideas. I remember when we always went for negotiations, we were always the first.
Of course, that was Cyril Ramaphosa talking about economic inclusion for all upon the launch of that Labour Nedlac score. Let's also cross over to the live Esidimeni arbitration hearings. They are set to resume. It is day 2, or rather the 3rd week of the live Esidimeni arbitration hearings. We will be giving you that as soon as we go live. For now, though, let's take a short break here on Newsroom. Do stay tuned.
Our stories.
How do I begin?
Our lives. When all seems to fail, we will raise our voices a bit louder for our justice.
I went into absolute shock. My whole body was shaky. I couldn't hold a phone, but there he was. I couldn't believe the nonchalance that they were still in the area 2 weeks later.
And in times when the justice system is not able to help us with our individual battles,
I'm willing to do anything. What are you doing? Nothing. Feeling sorry for yourself? No, it's not an option.
These are our stories on Cutting Edge Channel 404.
I feel it's a real person.
And it's nutritious and delicious.
It's good. I really like it.
This celebrates being South African. We love our beer, we love our food, we love our music.
For knowing who are going, you must know where you come from.
I'm excited to be part of this year.
For all your travel trends, catch us every Sunday, 12 midday on Channel 404.
Welcome to Media Monitor, the show that analyzes the big news stories that made headlines. We bring you robust discussions on stories that made headlines in the week, where we interact with media analysts to unpack these top stories. Join me every Sunday morning from 9 to 10 Central African Time as I bring you riveting news and analysis.
Stay tuned to Media Monitor every Sunday from 9 a.m.
We're shooting a campaign. We're telling genuine stories from real people that have been affected by the SABC.
It's also interesting to get the backstory in terms of their dreams to be on screen and eventually getting the pleasure to do that.
And understanding that they're communicating on a platform that speaks to millions of people. It speaks to how the SABC can fulfill its mandate.
The SABC represents the opportunity for so many young South Africans, for old South Africans, to be able to look at the world that they may not experience any other way.
People should continue to pay their TV license because it allows the SABC to bring quality programming.
The TV license is really part of the lifeblood of the channel and the corporation.
When you're listening to your favorite jams, you're listening to your favorite radio DJ, you must know that you made it possible by paying your TV license.
It's such a holistic process that goes into TV licenses. It's not only one part where we say South Africans have to pay for TV licenses. You pay a TV license because you get so much value out of it, and that's the content that you get every single day on the SABC platforms.
I have been in the film industry now for 51 years. I am quite satisfied with the evolution of television now, that you have got a lot of actors and you have got a lot of crew members, which will also play part of paying our licenses, because I think it's proper.
to Newsroom. We're coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg. I'm Shante Yankees, of course. Kendall Makamate is standing by with your support. You good, Kendall?
Absolutely, yeah. It's been a fantastic day so far, Shante, and lots to cover. Good morning to you.
Definitely. Jam-packed morning. Today we know that Eskom will be releasing their 2017 financial results. So we're asking, what are your views on that? Of course, we have been having some mixed reviews. We also spoke to SACP's Alex Masekela this morning on their outcomes, what they're hoping will transpire this morning.
Very interesting conversation, that one, I tell you. Debato Mama Mamurubela says the corruption that was being perpetrated has been brought to fruition. The current board and their executive must start building for confidence and country duty with patriotism, says Debat.
Definitely hoping for a cleanup of our SOEs. Jennifer Rundle says Moody's have downgraded Eskom to junk status already. Eskom will bring South Africa to its knees regardless of today's outcome.
That is the danger always looming when our SOEs get into trouble, isn't it?
Definitely. Let's move on. Let's have a look at our poll. Is the water crisis in Cape Town being used as a political tool? Well, we do know that there has been a crisis, obviously, in Cape Town, but deeper than that is the issue of management. Who is behind it? Who is spearheading it? Is it the DA? Is it the ANC? Is this a national thing? We've asked you this question this morning.
And 446 votes come in, and 86% reckon yes, it's being used as a political tool, this water crisis that's deepening in the Western Cape.
14% of you are saying no. Let's have a look why. Lechasa says everyone is trying to score points while our brothers and sisters are thirsty. This is not the time to score political points, but to address the matter and let the poor communities be assisted.
Mystic Man Malati says, I think it's a national crisis, not Cape Townians or DA-led government. Politicians must not gamble with natural causes, disaster. This affects people, not a party. And of course, there's a small matter of that. It's been like this for decades, for millions of South Africans.
And you know, that would then be my problem, that this is not a water crisis now, 2018.
Exactly.
This has been a water crisis in South Africa for decades. Many parts have been affected. Maybe only certain parts being affected now are bringing things to light.
Yes, brings to mind all sorts of questions, which I will not ask. What I will ask, though, is something about the Springboks. I mean, yesterday we had a letter from Alistair Coetzee going on about airing some dirty laundry in public, and we want to find out from you who's really to blame for the Springboks' poor form. Is it A, Yuri Roo, or is it Alistair Coetzee and his coaching staff?
So early in the year to be airing dirty laundry, Kendall. Let's have a look there. At 50% of you are saying Yuri Roo and Saru. The other 50% are saying Alistair Coetzee and staff. It's 50-50 now.
Very interesting that. Let's see what the reasoning behind this particular vote. Tabo says, if the coach is not doing his job, that's where we can see the poor performances from the players. I blame the head coach, says Tabo.
Tabatso says, all take blame just as the fame goes to all during the peak times. And that is true.
That is true.
That is definitely
true.
Indeed, we have a jam-packed morning this morning. We're going to have a look at your news and sports as well as all your updates. So first things first, let's have a look at your headlines. Eskom is expected to release its delayed financial results today. Gauteng MEC for Finance, Barbara Creasy, is currently testifying before the Esidimeni arbitration hearings in Parktown in Johannesburg. A Gauteng police task team are looking into allegations of sexual abuse at a Boksburg school in Gauteng. And Kendall is standing by with all of our sporting highlights this Tuesday. Kendall, what do you have?
Oh, quite a lot to cover this morning. Very interesting sporting news. Good morning to you. We've got a legend on our shores in South Africa. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. All right, it seems as if that's not going to happen right now. Literally, if you stick around, you'll hear about how Usain Bolt is trying to give some words of wisdom to youngsters in Roodepoort at a school as well. And we'll also be bringing you a quick update on what's happening with the Titans tonight, the first semi-final of the Momentum One Day Cup. And of course, a little bit we'll be bringing you about other sporting news. And in that, we're talking about Triple G and Saul Canelo Alvarez and how they're going to be fighting for a rematch on the 5th of May. More about all of this a little later. Make sure you stick around because Shantae has got the news.
Thank you very much for that, Kendall. Well, Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is addressing the NEDLAC Organised Labour School. Let's cross live.
Intelligence and all that are going to result in people creating machines that are going to displace workers more and more. Now there is talk of the 5th Industrial Revolution, and that is even going to be worse because it will be more driven by this artificial intelligence, more driven by this robotics and what have you. Now, this is precisely the issue that you sitting here as Labour needs to engage with, because you represent working people. And what happens when working people are displaced by artificial intelligence, technology, data, and all that? Now, a whole lot of things are going to start happening. Cars are no longer going to be driven by people. Buses are now going to be driving themselves, and all that. And many things are going to change. And as they change, Labour needs to have a clear voice of what should drive that change and what happens to the working people in our country. Always remembering that we live in a country that is still beset by 3 key challenges: poverty, inequality, and unemployment. And also that many of our people do not have the requisite skills. Now, unskilled people, many of the people that you represent, will easily be displaced by all these machines, by all these processes that are going to unfold. What we therefore need to do, as I've said earlier, is to agree on a social compact that will absorb all our energies, that will make sure that through a social compact that is all-encompassing, we are able to put in place processes that will resolve the problems that we face. Now, through this social compact, which should really be a collaboration between all social partners, we should be able to address the key challenges that we face. Now, I've always said that when all the key role players in our country, through a social compact, work together, there is nothing that we will never be able to resolve. Be it job creation, if we put our shoulders to wheel and work together and look at what impedes investment that will result in creating. Be it social development in our country where we rid our country of the poverty in a number of areas, we should be able to address all that. Now, we have proven that through, I would say, mini social compacts, that we are able to address key challenges that we face. We've managed to do that through the national minimum wage. I call that a mini social compact, and we can have a number of others, but we need an overriding and an overall social compact that will give us the wherewithal through which we will address the challenges that still beset our country. We could have it in education, where we improve the skills base of our people. We could have it in health, where we address the national health insurance and make sure that indeed it is properly implemented. We can have it in a number of areas, but we still need to be determined in our resolve at a broader level that through a social compact we should be able to move South Africa forward. Countries that have been able to do so, and I can think of countries like Ireland, countries like Holland, were able, during moments of crises, to find a way to work together. Now, we are now in the middle of an economic slump. Our growth prospects are not the type of growth prospects that we believe can generate a lot of jobs. Now, what should we be doing in order to generate meaningful economic recovery? What we need to do is to find ways of working together to address what impedes economic growth. And there are a number of areas that we can look at. I mean, we all agree that our economy is deformed. Our economy is not working at the level that it should be working. There are a number of things that we need to look at. One of those, the areas that impedes our growth, is our skill set. Our skill set in our country is not so great. Many of our workers are not skilled in areas that can drive, so well skilled in areas that can drive the economy forward. We need social partners to get together to address this. The Human Resource Development Council is seeking to do that, but we need to add much more energy. Yes, a number of labor leaders are involved in that council, but we do need to add more energy so that our economy can produce more skilled people, more artisans, and more people who will be able to work and generate growth in our economy. So that in itself does need greater focus. We also need to look at what is it that impedes growth, the other areas that impede growth. Our regulatory framework is an area that many investors keep saying, your regulatory framework and your processes of getting things approved are just that has impeded growth is corruption. Corruption in our economy is what has made a number of would-be investors to sit back and say, do we really need to be investing in this economy, particularly in our state-owned enterprises. Our state-owned enterprises are key movers and shakers and growth generators in our economy, and they have not been, as we all know, been functioning at the level at which we want them to function. Eskom is one good example. Eskom is the real engine of our economy, and we now all know that Eskom has been malfunctioning. It's been malfunctioning because of dysfunctionality at the governance level, but there's also been rife theft and corruption and embezzlement that has been going on in Eskom. What should have been going to invest in empowering Eskom for the productive economy has been wasted and siphoned out and gone into certain people's pockets and certain families' pockets, and thank God, at last they are being followed up, and we hope Now that has in a number of ways impeded our growth. It has impeded our growth, and yes, on that too, we do need to have great resolve on saying, what is it that we should be doing collectively to... In the private sector, in the corporate sector, they've been stealing money left, right, and center. That's why we have the Steinhoffs, where the billions and billions of your members' monies has just disappeared down the drain. And we are saying on that too, those people who are responsible. Now, those types of things impede growth. They impede economic growth, and they prevent our economy from growing to the extent that we want it to grow. So what we then require is we need to work together to rebuild our institutions so that principally our people can those.
Quite unfortunate there with the signal. Just listening to the newly elected ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, touching on issues of the impediment of economic growth in South Africa, as well as Eskom and what's been taking place there, and him sharing his sentiments. We will be giving you more updates on that. For now, though, Gauteng Finance MEC Barbara Creasy is currently testifying at the Esidimeni arbitration hearings in Parktown in Johannesburg. She will be followed by Gauteng Premier David Makura. For the latest, let's cross live.
Treasury did an analysis of what was causing the problem. What we found was that there were management problems in those hospitals, but there were also financial management problems that related to the management of supply chain. So what had happened, my predecessor, MEC Mandla Nkomfe, had appointed PricewaterhouseCoopers to lead the intervention in the Department of Health. And what they had done is that they had worked on the hospital management in these central hospitals. They had established standard cost centers in those hospitals. They had transformed the supply chain management environment. They'd introduced standard long-term contracts for things like linen, food, medicines, and other medical consumables. They'd set up a hospital management framework, and they'd also done a lot of work on the finance and financial management in those central hospitals. And the result of that was that by the time I made this budget speech on the 3rd of March 2015, we were in the process of winding up that particular intervention and concluding that intervention and handing the health department back to the head of department and the MEC.
Were the accruals cleared?
The accruals had been considerably reduced. Justice, so at that point, under Central Hospital Services, at the end of the 14-15 financial year, the accruals in the Central Hospital Services would have been in the region of 718 million rand. But much of that money would have been current.
Do we know, could you, in the process of trying to resolve this, determine what happened to the money, which was supposed to be paid to service providers? In other words, what was wrong with the supply management chain?
I think that there were two things that were wrong, Justice. The first thing that was wrong was that in the central hospitals themselves, the management was not clear what their budget was, and was not clear that it was their responsibility to spend within the context of their budget. So what happened in those central hospitals was that medical personnel would order whatever they wanted to order, and they would not check when they made those orders whether there were supplies of that particular good or service in the medical supply depot. They would also not check whether they had budget to order that particular medical consumable. And that is why we put in the transversal contracts, so that there could be greater control over the process of ordering consumables.
So in simple language, they issued contracts for supply of hospital consumables against money they did not have. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, Justice.
Or
and
in excess of money that was allocated to them?
Over a period of many years, in excess of money that they had. Or, Justice, they didn't check what was in the stores. It was easier just to order something new and get it delivered than to go and check what was in the stores.
Was anybody held culpable for a $4.5 billion overrun over the years? Could you point to some administrators who would allow an overrun and a financial mismanagement of that magnitude?
Justice, I would not be in a position to give you details of that. I was not the MEC of Finance at that time. I was not the MEC of Health. I've merely checked on that. I know what were the key areas of intervention and what went wrong.
Of course, Ms. Chrissy, the importance of this inquiry does not escape you, right?
Yes, Justice.
Next to 2015, and the Department of Health decides we don't have enough money to look after mental health care users. So you have to look back and say what went wrong. And then you find that, in fact, the department was under administration and the decision was preceded by considerable financial mismanagement.
Justice, what I can say to you is that while Provincial Treasury was administering that department, we were able to fix the problem without cutting core services. And we were able to fix the problem because we understood at the end of the day that it was a management problem, not a financial problem. Or should I say, it manifested as a financial problem, but the roots were in the way in which, were in the interface between head office and those central provincial hospitals and the way they were being managed.
But was anybody, that was my question initially, ever held accountable for the financial mismanagement that led to the Section 18 administration? Do you know of anybody whose head rolled for that?
Off the top of my head, I don't have that information, Justice. I don't know what disciplinary hearings would have taken place.
May I proceed?
Thank you. You were still busy dealing with the aspects relating to cost reduction targets with reference to LR 154. You were outlining the matters which were considered to be non-core and in respect of which it was necessary to reduce those costs.
Yes, Justice. I'm now on page
20, I think you were when I interrupted
yes.
you.
Yes, page 20. And I do give some detail there on the fact that the Department of Health by the end of, by this point was complying with all of the audit findings, and that we were confident at that point that our efforts towards strengthening the health system's effectiveness will result in improvements in service delivery. And for that reason, in that financial year, 15-16, we increased the health budget by 496 million. This would have been the provincial contribution for, amongst other things, medical supplies and medicines. And overall, in that financial year, Justice, the department had an allocation of 34 billion rand, which increases to 39 billion in the outer year. So what we can see is between 14-15 and 15-16, which is the budget that we are addressing here, the Department of Health budget was not cut, Justice. It went up from 31.4 billion to 34 billion rand.
Yes, I see that.
Thank you. In line with your effort to ensure that core services are being rendered, and looking at the budget increase during the period of 2015 and 2016, did this trend of increasing the budget for the Department of Health continue?
Yes, Justice, I'd like to refer you to ELA 157, which is a spreadsheet on the Department of Health's finances. And what you can see there is that every year, from 2014-15 up until the current financial year, the budget has increased. And what we are showing you there is what was the main appropriation. In other words, what did we do in March of each year? Then the adjusted appropriation. So what did we do in November of each year in the adjustment appropriation? And then we also show you expenditure. So that's actual against budget. And what you will see is that I've already said from 14-15 to 15-16, the budget increased from 31.4 billion to 34.1 billion.
Yes.
16-17, the budget increased from 35.3 to 37.6. And 17-18, which is the current financial year, the budget has increased from 37.6 to 40.2. Obviously, the current financial year is still ongoing, so we can't show you actual outcomes.
Mm. So the notion that there ought to be a cut on core services was totally foreign to your financial planning and budgeting, was it?
Yes, Justice.
The assertion that there was massive pressure from Treasury, national and provincial, to reduce expenditure on core services is false?
Yes, Justice. The pressure was on non-core services.
Well, we'll come back to that. Also, the importance of that point does not escape you either. We'll have to revert back to it.
No, Justice.
Up to now, the evidence has been cut costs on mental health care users because the state doesn't have money to fund their care. That's what Dr. Manamela says, that's what Dr. Silibano said, and that's what former MEC Mahlangu said. Is there any truth in that assertion?
Justice, I would like to take you through the budget for mental health services, and I will show you the figures. I think that you can then draw your own conclusions from the figures.
I'm going to wait until you do that. Council, you may proceed. But thank you for LR 157. I've seen the numbers and their progression.
Thank you, MEC. As you have dealt with this aspect relating to the department's budget being increased over a period of time, I would like you to assist and deal with the question that the Justice has just raised with specific reference to the budget for mental health. And if you can just go ahead and deal with that with reference to ELA 160.
Thank you very much. Justice, ELA 160 is the mental health services budget and expenditure for the period 2013-14 up until the current financial year. And what we have done in Treasury is we have brought together all the different areas in the budget where we fund mental health care services and psychiatric services. So you will see there that we're dealing with psychiatric hospitals, Life Esidimeni, mental health non-profit institutions, mental health district services, and then the total. Now, overall, Justice, what we are showing you is what was the original budget. So if I can start with 2013-14, the original budget was 1.1 billion. The adjusted budget was 1.073 billion. The actual expenditure was 1.011 billion. And in that financial year, there was an under expenditure of 62 million. The following year, 14-15, the budget was 1.161. The adjusted budget was 1.190, and the actual expenditure was 1.237, and there was an over expenditure in the 14-15 year of 47 million rand. If we can then move to the 15-16 financial year.
But before you do, Life Esidimeni line item reflects no reduction in actual expenditure, even after the adjustment. In fact, the adjustment was nil adjustment.
That's correct, and in fact,
Justice. Sorry, Justice. It's me.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry to intervene. We were only provided with the document a couple of hours ago. Could I please ask the witness to just repeat what she said, because we were scrambling to follow, and I don't want to miss anything. I'm sorry for the intervention, but I'm sorry.
Your intervention caused somebody
to fall down. Apologies for that.
Sorry there, are you okay? The camera person, sorry, ma.
Sorry, Jess, we haven't had a chance to look at the document before now, so if we could just go through it a bit slowly so we can digest it.
Yes.
Thanks.
No doubt we're going to do that, and let me see, Chris has heard you. Would you just want to repeat
let me apologize to Council for the late production of this. We only found out on Friday that you would be interested in this information, and it was quite a task to assemble it because the information was in different budget heads. This information begins with the 2013...
For starters, has Council got LR 160 beforehand? Do you have it before you, Council?
Yes, I have it now.
Oh, okay, very well. Let's proceed. Does every Council have it? We are all on the same sheet, so to speak. Okay.
So we begin in the 13-14 financial year. And this is, it's before my time, but we thought it was relevant to show you trends, because this is when 13-14, the department was still under the administration of Provincial Treasury. So what you see there is that the budget that was allocated was 1.156 billion. The adjusted budget was 1.073 billion, and the actual expenditure was 1.011 billion, and there was an under expenditure in that financial year of 62 million. The following year, which is 2014-15, the budget was 1.161 billion. It was adjusted upwards in November to 1.190 billion. The actual expenditure was 1.237 billion, and in that financial year there was an over expenditure of 47 million rand. We now move to the next financial year, and 15-16 I think is the is one of the controversial years.
Yes.
And what you will see there, Justice, is that in 15-16, the over-expenditure of the previous financial year is taken into account in the overall balance. So, these services receive 1.268 billion in the original budget. It is adjusted upwards in November to 1.289. The actual expenditure is 1.228, so there is an under expenditure of 60 million. The following year.
And in relation to life as Esidimeni, there was an under expenditure of 29 million. Do I read it correctly?
That's correct.
29.2 million under expenditure.
That's correct, Justice. In the following year, which is the 16-17 financial year, the overall budget for mental health services was 1.350. So it's up again from the previous year. The adjusted budget is slightly down, it's 1.290, and the actual expenditure is 1.279, and there is an under expenditure of 11 million rand. And I think if you read the Life Esidimeni line, what you can see is that there is a reduction of the Life Esidimeni budget, but there is money going elsewhere. So overall, in terms of mental health services, there was no decrease from the side of provincial government in terms of mental health services.
But what were they then doing? What is this all about, Ms. Chrissy?
I can't say, Justice.
But why would they shut down a facility when the numbers show that there was more than enough money to look after mental health care users, not generally, even at Life Esidimeni? What was all this about? Do you know? Can you make sense of this?
I don't know, Justice. I can only present you the figures.
Okay, let's see. Let's go slowly. Do the figures suggest to you that there was any need to shut down a facility that abruptly?
Justice,
on the grounds of finance, at least.
Justice, I would like to answer that question when I present to you what was told to us in the Premier's Budget Council.
Okay.
I'm still coming there.
Let's defer it to them. Very well. You go on.
Thank you.
Just for the record, Justice, if I can complete the story, in the current financial year, the budget for mental health services is 1.412 billion. It's been adjusted to 1.413, and as of December, we had spent 1.136 billion. So I don't really want to go into the variance because you would understand that December is not the end of the financial year. So it doesn't really tell us
but those
about the
actuals would include actuals related to reabsorbing survivors or from the Marathon project, isn't it so?
Yes, Justice. If you look under the item of Life Esidimeni, you would see that the expenditure there is 142 million, and it's up from what was the original projection. And my understanding would be because there would be patients that would have been reabsorbed.
Very well.
You have previously dealt with the need to reduce costs, and you have you gave much detail about that. Can you just assist this hearing what actually informed that policy decision with reference to ELA 149?
Justice ELA 149 is the Government Gazette, number 10058 of 15 November 2013. And this Government Gazette regulates cost cutting by all provincial departments and their accounting officers. And what this Gazette says, and I'm not going. It's quite a long document. I'm not going to go through it in the interests of time. But what it says is that from the 1st of January 2014, the cost containment measures that must be implemented by all accounting officers, all heads of department, whether at national or provincial level, it's consultants, travel and subsistence, expenses relating to catering and events, arrangements related to debit and credit cards, and containment of the provincial of the wage bill.
On which page of the Gazette do I find all that?
It's from page 2. Page 2 would be consultants and travel and subsistence. It's item 4. So 4.1 would be consultants, 4.6 travel and subsistence. It would then go on page 4, 4.23 expenses relating to catering and events. It would then go on to page 5, 4.27 arrangements related to debit and credit cards. And lastly, the issue of sorry.
That's pretty confusing, I must say. I think we have to start again. I have before me ELA 149.
That's right.
On its cover, it's Government Gazette 37042 of the 15th November 2013.
That's correct.
And if you turn it over, I can see signed by the Minister of Finance, Praveen Gordhan. And then there's a schedule. So the numbering you refer to is that numbering of the schedule.
No, if we can go after the schedule.
Or is it what appears to be a circular on
sorry,
cost
yes,
containment?
it's the National Treasury Instruction Note.
So the numbers refer to that one?
Yes,
okay,
my apologies.
Let's start all over again then. Are counsel with us? I know we're flipping quickly over documents. Are we together? Okay, very well. Then we are looking at the circular on cost containment measures. What do you say is relevant and important for us to look at?
Page 2. It lists the items that are targeted for cost containment. And 4.1, engagement of consultants. And then we go further down that same page, 4.6, travel and subsistence. And there's lots of detail on travel and subsistence on page 3 and half of page 4. And then we go to expenses related to catering and events, 4.23. And lastly, on page 5, 4.27, arrangements related to debit and credit cards. So these measures, Justice, are all about the guidelines that National Treasury gave all of us as to where we were to cut costs.
We were told repeatedly that the cost containment in relation to life Esidimeni was demanded by National Treasury. And the guidelines point in a different direction.
Justice, I can only show you what binds us as departments in terms of the Government Gazette and Treasury regulations.
But is there any part in this that would justify the assertion by the MEC and Dr. Manamela and Dr. Silibano that they were constrained to cut expenditure towards Life Esidimeni because Treasury demanded it, or demanded of them to save costs?
What Treasury demanded was that we save money on consultants, travel and expenditures, travel and subsistence, expenses relating to catering and events, and arrangements related to debit and credit cards. And that is what National Treasury has been monitoring in each and every department since the circular came into effect on the 1st of January 2014. It's also monitored, Justice, by the Auditor General.
Well, I know you seem to be scrumming away from saying your colleagues were blatantly wrong in telling us that they were obliged by Treasury to cut costs on patients. Can that be justified?
Treasury has never demanded that any department cut core services.
Council.
MEC, earlier on you have taken us through L156 with regard to budget processes. Can you just assist to give us an indication what did the Department of Health present before the Premier Budget Committee? But before doing so, please just explain how is the Premier's Budget Committee composed and what is its objective?
Justice, with respect, before I answer that question, because it relates to the issue that you were asking me about what instructions have Treasury given to departments, provincial Treasury. I have requested permission and received permission to declassify an executive council document. It's LA155. Subject, Gauteng
Yes.
Provincial Government.
And we're not committing any crime by looking at secrets, are we?
No, Justice.
It is properly declassified.
You can look at it freely.
Okay.
Justice, the date of this Executive Council memo is the 22nd of July 2015. And the subject of this memo is Gauteng Provincial Government Own Revenue Generation Strategy and Cost Containment. Now, you will recall, Justice, that in my budget speech of the 3rd of March 2015, I had...
And is this a minute of the meeting?
This is the decision. This is what we call an Executive Council memorandum, and it is the decision that we asked the Executive Council to make on revenue generation and cost containment.
And that was on the 22nd of July, 2015.
Yes, Justice.
Thank you.
Now, Justice, because overall government budgets were facing constraints, and because overall we were aware as provincial government that there was a high level for demand on our services, you will recall that in my budget presentation of 2015, March 2015, I indicated that we wanted to try and do two things. The first was to increase our own revenue. It's only 5% of our budget, but in tough financial times, it's significant. And secondly, what we had indicated at that time was that we had set specific targets on containing costs. This document sets out how we intended to raise revenue, and I'm not going to go into it because it's very long and technical, and not necessarily the subject of this investigation, but I think it's important because it shows the commitment we were making in a situation where we were facing cuts from National Treasury to ameliorate the complexities that our own departments were facing, but doing everything in our power to improve our own revenue generation. And then what it does is that it makes a decision of the Executive Council, those cost containment measures that I mentioned in my budget speech. So if there's a decision of the Executive Council, then it's not just what the MEC of Finance feels like saying in public. It is what binds members of the Executive Council and their departments. And that's why we took it to the Executive Council, because we said this is where we want to contain costs.
Was Ms. Mahlangu MEC then for Health?
She was
present at this meeting?
She was, Justice.
And did she raise dissent to the decision or the strategy contemplated in LA 155?
I don't remember MEC Mahlangu raising any dissent on this matter. I know that where there were concerns on this memo, it really related to the issues of travel and subsistence. And that really, Justice, was about the different types of operations that different departments are involved in. So if I can make an example for you, if you have a blanket ban on travel of more than 100 kilometers per month for all government employees, where you have agricultural extension officers, in one day, those agricultural extension officers will have traveled 100 kilometers, and then for the rest of the month, they will not be able to do their work. So what we were trying to show colleagues is that we are setting targets here, but it's up to departments to show us how they will save money in terms of those targets. So that was the purpose of this memorandum.
Page 10, at the bottom thereof, seems to speak to implementation of cost containment measures. What is of significance there?
Do you want me to read the section? Managing public sector expenditure involves balancing a range of competing priorities. A better mix between personnel, capital, and goods and services spending is needed, and also requires a conscientious effort to ensure that all expenditure categories are properly costed and to improve the link between budgeting and planning. The prevailing economic conditions outlined elsewhere and the importance of protecting the provision of essential services and boosting infrastructure spending make it incumbent upon the Gauteng provincial government to revisit the composition of the provincial government.
Now, that's my point. I mean, the document talks to the importance of protecting the provision of essential services. And one of your former colleagues comes before this arbitration and says that it was the decision of the Premier's Budget Council that she may, or her department may reduce expenditure on healthcare, and in particular on mental health care.
Justice, Perhaps it's a good time for us to go to what was presented to the Premier's Budget Council and what the Premier's Budget Council said about what was presented to it.
Yeah, you certainly should go there sometime. I needed to understand LR 155 and its importance in your evidence. So I invite you to draw my attention to those parts that you require me to read. That's the one part that seems to be obvious. The next paragraph talks about non-core. You don't have to read it line by line. You could explain or read whatever is convenient so that we understand what was said about essential services and what was said about non-core items.
I think, Justice, what this paragraph says is in keeping with the spirit of cost containment, particularly with regard to non-core items. The Gauteng Provincial Treasury has drafted a cost containment circular to all provincial departments based on a similar National Treasury instruction, outlining in detail the areas in which expenditure is to be curtailed and the necessary control measures are instituted that ensure that all expenditure incurred is necessary, appropriate, paid promptly, and subsequently reported on. And the circular then goes into detail. When we talk about administrative fees, what do we mean? When we talk about communication, what do we mean? And then on page 12, Justice, we specifically talk about, there is a table there, table 5, on page 12. And what table 5 does is it lists the items that are targeted for cost containment, and it lists for each year, for each item, what we expect provincial government as a whole to save. And those items are operating payments, travel and subsistence, communication, consumables, venues and facilities, catering and departmental activities, administration fees and entertainment. And the overall target for the whole of provincial government, not for the Department of Health, for the whole of provincial government, is to cut 10% of non-core spending in the 2016-17 financial year to realize 158 million rands worth of saving. So this is our target for cost cutting on non-core items over a 3-year period.
So what was this obsession about? What was this whole mantra about? Shut it down, life Esidimeni. To achieve what? To save what?
I don't know, Justice.
Council.
Thank you, MEC. You were still to deal with the composition and the purpose of the Premier Budget Committee.
Thank you very much, Council. Justice, I'm dealing with LR 150, and it's the terms of reference for the establishment of the Premier's Budget Committee. And there is a Word document, but there is also a PowerPoint. And although the pages are not numbered, if we use the title page as 1, 2, 3, I would like to turn to slide 4 in the PowerPoint, and it's entitled Roles and Responsibilities.
And you all council have LR 150 in the slide PowerPoint. And which slide should we look at?
So it's if you count the title page of the slides as 1, it's slide 4. And it's entitled Roles and Responsibilities.
Thank you.
So it says there, the Premier's Budget Council will make final budget allocations for priorities and pressure points. And I want to emphasize this issue of pressure points, because I have explained to you, Justice, that even in tough financial situations, the Department of Health has received additional money in every budget and every adjustment. And that is relevant to this inquiry, because if at any stage we'd been told we can't fund statutory services, please give us more money, that could have been taken into consideration. Engagement on budgetary issues on an ongoing basis, as well as significant improvement on resource allocation, reorientating expenditure away from consumption towards investment, in other words, infrastructure. And then there is stuff about infrastructure delivery, so making sure, Justice, it's not relevant to this inquiry, but the reason why it's there is because historically a number of provincial departments have underspent on their infrastructure budgets, and infrastructure is obviously very important in terms of job creation. So the Budget Committee would be scrutinizing spending on infrastructure budgets and trying to ensure there was efficiencies. Ongoing assessment on the utilization of provincial resources, and explore creative and dynamic approaches to expedite infrastructure delivery and job creation.
So when an MEC has a pinch, a financial pinch on her shoe, this would be the place to come, isn't it?
Yes, Justice.
And that ordinarily ought to be reported to the Premier's Budget Council, which engages budgetary issues on an ongoing basis, and would also focus on resource allocation processes.
Yes, Justice.
So if life as Esidimeni was a real financial burden and it was going to break the dam walls, would this be the place where that would have to be reported?
Yes, Justice.
And this is the place where the allocations and adjustments would then be considered and perhaps approved?
Yes, Justice.
Very well. And just before I go away, MEC Mahlangu claims that this is where she raised the strains and stresses of her department, financial strains and stresses.
Justice, I'm going to show you her presentation.
You're going to come and show us her presentation at that meeting?
Yes, Justice.
Very well. Again, we wait. Council?
Yes. Can you then proceed to indicate if did this council hold any meeting with government departments, and if so, when was this meeting held, and what were the issues?
I think it's important, Justice, just to say to you, from the side of the executive authorities, in other words, the MECs, who was a member of this council. I think it's relevant. So the Budget Council is chaired by the Premier, Premier David Makura, and the members of the Budget Council are myself as the MEC for Treasury, and then the heads of the clusters in their capacity as heads of clusters. So MEC Lebogang Maile is the chair of the economic cluster, so he was a member of the Budget Council. MEC Ismail Vadi is the chair of the governance cluster, so he was there in that capacity. And MEC Mahlangu herself, as chair of the social cluster, was a member of the Budget Committee in that capacity.
as head of the social cluster.
Yes. Now, perhaps it's important to share with you, Justice, why was the Budget Council created in that way? And the reason it was created in that way was that obviously I would be the custodian of provincial finances, but each of the chairpersons would be representing the interests of their particular clusters. So if there were budget shortfalls in the social cluster, it would be up to the social cluster chair to be saying, no, you can't be switching all the money to the economic cluster. What about education? What about health? If the priority was to improve economic performance, MEC Maile would be saying, what about the economic department? So it was constructed in that way so that the different interest groups within provincial cabinet had a voice in the decision-making process. So the first meeting council of the budget, of the Premier's Budget Council, was on the 11th and the 13th of November 2014. And after that meeting, or at that meeting, there was a request made to the MEC of Health to return to that meeting. And although you do not have this document, Justice, this is the letter which I wrote to the MEC of Health, which I will read. Dear MEC Mahlangu, thank you for your input. You don't have this document, no. But I will read it to you. It's a short letter. Thank you for, let me take this opportunity to thank you, and so on. Subsequent to the meeting, it was decided that your department should come back to the PBC with feedback on the following. 1, the Health and Provincial Treasury to provide a progress report on the intervention and indicate what is outstanding and what still needs to be done. 2, the department should demonstrate decisions being taken on their budget and share the quantification of their cost containment. And 3, the department should demonstrate clearly areas where they would direct resources if there were additional resources. So we're saying, if we've got more money to give you, where would you like it? So, can I proceed, Council, to...
Let's find a way to deal with that letter. I would like to have it to come. Its date again, would you repeat its date?
I can get you the signed copy of this letter. This letter is an unsigned copy. Yes. So I think we would want to submit it to you, together with any other information you would want.
Very well. Once it is, we'll provisionally admit it, but council have to see it so they can pose questions. So Advocate Utama, would you arrange that gets, your tenure arrange that gets copied and made available to all your colleagues? And we shall name it Ella how much?
Sorry? Ella?
Ella 162.
Ella 162. Very well, that is provisional admitted, and the signed copy can be made available later. You may proceed, MEC or Council.
You were still dealing with the first meeting of the Premier's Budget Council. And whilst you are still on that point, earlier on you testified with reference to LR 149 in relation to the memo or the directive from National Treasury, which required the departments to take measures for cost reduction. And can you please refer to LR 151 in relation to the Gauteng provincial government's effort in making sure that guidelines were made in relation to those issues?
So, Justice, I've already explained in terms of the National Treasury Gazette, which is ELA 149. Because we are now talking about November 2014. And so we are bound by, at this stage, we are bound by the Provincial Government Gazette, ELA 149. And I've already explained to the proceedings the non-core items that were targeted for cost containment. So when we asked the department to present on cost containment, it was in relation to Circular 149. Because all of us were expected to contain our costs. You would also see that the first item was about the health intervention. So it's also about progress in containing spending in the central hospitals on goods and services in line with the provincial treasury intervention in that regard.
But before you move on, I'm a little confused. What is ELA 151?
Okay, that's the document I want to move on to, Justice.
Oh, very well.
ELA 151 is the presentation that was made by the Department of Health on the 26th of November 2014 when they returned, as requested by my letter, ELA 162, to the Premier's Budget Council.
So this is a presentation from Department of Health?
Yes, Justice.
Who at the meeting made the presentation?
It would have, the MEC would have given an initial overview, and the details of the presentation would have been made by the head of department.
Yes. And who was it then?
Dr. Selebano.
Dr. Selebano. And the MEC would have done the introductory overhead comments and remarks about the presentation.
That is normally how it works, Justice.
Very well, you may continue.
Thank you, Justice. So we're now working on document 151, and you will see that the first issue that they refer to is cost containment. And they talk about litigation against the department. They talk about Selby Park and Alexander Clinic. And then on page 3, slide 6, they refer specifically to Life Esidimeni. And I want to read what this presentation says. It says 20% of the 251 per annum currently paid to Life Esidimeni. The original contract was signed with the National Department of Health on the 1st of August 1979, and they talk about 50.2 million saving. And then under risks, they say that departmental institutions may not have adequate capacity to absorb patients from Life Esidimeni facilities. Now, our understanding of this presentation was that the intention was to gradually close down services offered by this facility. And our understanding of 20% was that 20% per annum, as it says. And I suppose one can assume from that we're talking about a 5-year project. And that the intention was to absorb these patients into departmental institutions. It doesn't say into NGOs. It says departmental institutions. Now, Justice, I would then, it then goes on the different cost saving.
Well, before you walk away from there, I just want to understand those entries, which are rather fine. So the plan was to save 50 million a year over a period on a base of 250 million. Is that a correct understanding?
Well, I think if we go back to the presentation I did on the budget for Life Esidimeni, I think I would have to just check, but I think the budget was 265, if I'm correct.
Yes. Here they have it as 251, anyway.
Well, yes.
That might be before the adjustment.
Sorry, in 14-15, the budget was 251. And in
that number
per annum.
Per annum. And then they add that the contract was signed with the National Department of Health in August 1979. And they then drop a number, 50.2 million, as the saving anticipated.
Yes, Justice.
Now, immediately thereafter, there's a column on risks. What does that speak to? Does it mean departmental institutions may not have adequate capacity to absorb patients from Life Esidimeni?
Our understanding of this presentation was that the MEC wanted to provide the same care that was being provided by Life Esidimeni in state institutions over a period of time, and that the success or failure or her ability to implement and the department's ability to implement this project would depend on availability of beds in state institutions. So that was our understanding.
Is there any mention, or could we infer a mention of NGOs from that presentation?
There was no mention of non-governmental organizations in this presentation.
And who would have drawn attention to this risk, that there may very well be insufficient beds at departmental institutions?
Just as I do not remember who drew attention to it, but it was there. And our understanding was not that if the beds didn't exist in government institutions, patients would be put elsewhere. Our understanding was we may not be able to do this because there won't be beds available. That was our understanding.
And the budget numbers you showed us reflected no reduction in the subsequent financial year. They seem to reflect an increase. Could you help us understand that?
Well, what I said when I made that presentation is that you will see that money moves from one institution to another, but the total amount of money that is spent on mental health services, in fact, increases in the 16-17 financial year. It's not decreased.
Council?
Thank you. Whilst you were dealing with the presentation made by the Department of Health, can you then take us through what has been the outcome of that meeting?
I will do that, Council. I would just like to draw the Commission's attention to the documentation from slide 8 onwards. And slide 8 onwards is priority areas if additional money is available. So the department, and you will see, there are various things there: electronic patient records, archiving, reducing waiting times, laundries, equipment. So there are different budget heads there. But nowhere there does it say that we are not able to provide services for psychiatric patients or for mental health services. And we specifically asked them, where do you need additional money? And we did indeed give them additional money.
Just coming out of the live Esidimeni arbitration hearings, MEC for Finance in Gauteng, Barbara Creasy, giving her testimony on with regards to the budgetary constraints over the past couple of years. For now, though, we are going to be crossing to Eskom. It is also expected to release its delayed financial results today. Let's cross there live.
My fellow board members and I took office. Yet, before I break these things, let me put them away. Yet, surprisingly, it feels more like I've been here for 100 days. Our focus and discussions in this time have centered around 3 key things, and things that are also interrelated. The first one was to find a neat solution to the liquidity issues that we face. The second one is addressing governance-related matters as a matter of urgency and releasing the Eskom interim results on a going consent basis before the end of January. These challenges required quick and decisive action. Although these cannot be entirely solved overnight, we believe that the steps that we have already taken are a first step to, amongst other things, inculcate a renewed culture of good governance and entrenching financial and business discipline as a foundation to restoring the credibility and integrity of this institution. Ladies and gentlemen, as the board, we strongly believe that what underpins the stabilization of Eskom is fulfilling our duty to improve trust and restore investor confidence in order to access financial markets and to reestablish the credibility of this strategic organization, which will be celebrating its 95th anniversary in March. The issuing of these interim results today is one of many more necessary steps in the journey of its renewal. The decision by Moody's to downgrade the company's rating on Friday is understandable, but it stands as a beacon of motivation to double our efforts in our united purpose to ensure financial sustainability of Eskom. We are mindful that this will not be easy, but as a collective, we have the skills, the strength and the courage to turn things around. Our mandate is non-negotiable. We need to root out financial mismanagement, malfeasance and maladministration as critical foundation to restoring transparent and effective governance. We also need to entrench financial and business discipline in order to rebuild confidence in this great institution. A critical part of restoring governance is defining a framework within which we as a board can operate alongside our shareholder as represented by the Ministry and the Department of Public Enterprises. To this end, and in the best interest of both entities, we have discussed and agreed on a framework that clearly sets out roles, responsibilities, and clear deliverables of the board and the shareholder, where the duties of the board start and where the duties of the ministry and the department ends. We've also taken time to define our expectations of the executive, where our duties as a board stop, and where those of the executive start. The board firmly believes that getting this operating framework right is critical to ensuring that we always have the right people at the right places doing the right things. Since our appointment, the board has already had 2 meetings. Our first board meeting, at our first board meeting, we each committed ourselves to the difficult task at hand. We are mindful that we were appointed as a matter of urgency to take difficult decisions in the best interest of the company and the nation. In this regard, we have seen the departure of several executives. In addition, we have invested the time we have had since taking office in speaking to bankers, lenders, and investors to explore several options for helping fund our cash flow needs. The government, business, customers, and investors have expectations. It is in this spirit that we take action to reaffirm the nation's trust. We will continuously work closely with the National Energy Regulator of South Africa, NERSA, to find a solution to the future price path in the interest of the country. In an earlier address, the Deputy President of the Republic, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, is known to have called Eskom, I quote, a jewel in our democracy, unquote. These are not just words, but depict a sobering reality. Eskom is a complex business incorporating 3 critical divisions of generation, transmission, and distribution. It plays a pivotal role in the economy, contributing about 3% towards our GDP as a country. It is more than just power stations and power lines. Its performance is also measured by overall value added to the lives of all South Africans. Our developmental responsibilities range from building and maintaining power plants and networks to electrification and supplying households, schools, and factories with electricity, to support local industries and stimulating skills development and job creation. Eskom is also about creating a base on which South Africa can grow, helping to transform the lives of a large percentage of the population who live in poverty. The success of Eskom is the success of the country, and this jewel has to be safeguarded. At this time, allow me to thank the 47,000 employees who continue to work hard and remain dedicated to keeping the lights on, despite the reputational onslaught that faces the company. I salute you for your resilience and for displaying a professional outlook in the face of adversity. To the executives who took to put pen to paper, thank you for displaying the courage to openly denounce corruption. The board has complete faith in the newly appointed interim group chief executive, Mr. Paramani Hadebe, who has a wealth of experience, and we have faith in his ability to face these difficult challenges head on. Today, Paramani and the acting CFO, Caleb Kasim, will share the interim results with you. While all financial indicators have declined, the business has sustained excellent operational performance, including successfully increasing capacity through its new build capacity expansion program and connecting new homes through its electrification program. Good progress has been made in solving the audit qualification issue in the past financial year ended 31 March 2017, and I'm confident that the qualification will be cleared by year end. The auditors view our liquidity status in a serious light. Indeed, we have a mammoth task at hand, but one which we intend to face with great courage and enthusiasm. Ladies and gentlemen, it is said that obstacles that are in one's way are not meant to stop one. They are designed to point the way to a new route, new possibilities, and new doorways. I believe that through a display of inspirational and ethical leadership, and through a collaborative and diligent approach by the board, the executive, and the whole 47,000 men and women at Eskom, who are proud of, committed to living in and serving South Africa. Eskom remains motivated to move towards a successful future, to deliver on our mandate, and to remain South Africa's trusted and credible electricity supplier. I also believe that part of any credible solution to stabilize Eskom centers around transparent and effective governance, starting with the board, supported by competent and strong management to formulate and execute on strategy that supports the board's mandate. I want to reiterate that I strongly believe that with the right governance structures at the board and executive management level, of priority is entrenching financial and business discipline as a foundation to restoring the credibility and integrity of the utility with financial markets. These are some of the key principles that are critical to stabilize, reform, and ultimately set Eskom for a sustained success. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, I just think it's also important to thank you for your role in querying, in quizzing, in lifting the lead, in elevating the issues for public interest. We thank you and we urge you to continue. Thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you, Kulu.
Thank you so much, Chair. And now for the details on the operational and financial status of the company, I'll call Mr. Masekela to give us an overview on the operational matters. He will be followed later on by Mr. Educator for the details on the finances.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for making time here to be with us today. So, according members of the media, the chairman of the board here, and some board members who are available here today, executive of Eskom. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to stand here in front of you. And I'll start by highlighting that I don't see my responsibility as being that of Eskom, but I see it as that of the South African economy, our country. And I'm honored that I've had people who felt that I could add value in this space, and I'll do my best to do so. The contents of the presentation here today will touch a bit on the overview of the key challenges that Eskom is facing, which you guys have covered in detail. We'll also look at the leadership and governance and operational performance. Then we'll look at the financial performance. Now, normally you are advised not to start on the negative, but we want to be open as possible. And we want to highlight that what you've been writing about is correct. And that is, Eskom is facing significant financial challenges. But you have to understand where those challenges come from, those financial challenges. This is the outcome of three mechanisms. I think the chair has touched on a number of them. We're here where we are because of poor leadership across the whole spectrum of Eskom. Decisions that had to be taken were not taken. And now we're where we are. The second issue, again, Chair has touched on that, is a lack of corporate governance. There's a lack of integrity. When you talk to investors and fund managers, they want you to spend a bit more trying to justify the decision you're making or what you're telling them, because they have to sense it and decide whether they want, is it worth their while to believe it. We are always on the news for wrong reasons. And the liquidity issue that the chairman has highlighted is the outcome of that. We reached a stage where the funders felt that they could no longer engage with Eskom. The third issue is capital structure of the balance sheet of this institution. So the first one is poor leadership, corporate or lack of corporate governance, and the third one is the capital structure or the balance sheet. This has been the challenge with this institution for some time. But because of the two other factors there on top, we are now facing severe challenges. And we have reached a stage where it's becoming clearer to all of us that the sustainability of Eskom cannot be achieved through borrowing. I'll come back to that. Now, to then understand these financial challenges that are besetting or that are facing Eskom, you have to separate two things for your clear understanding of what is happening. You need to put on this side and look into the operational performance of the institution. And on the other, you then have to look at what we call key challenges facing Eskom. If you are looking at the operational performance, and again, the chair already touched on that, while the performance is not optimal, but it is satisfactory. Sometimes we tend to forget about the day-to-day operations of what Eskom is doing. And accordingly, those 47,000 people that are working for Eskom have done incredible work under trying times. Of course, we have those that we have to deal with. But purely on the operational side of business, the institution has done well. We can improve that. We can enhance the efficiency of that. On the key challenges that are facing Eskom, and those have contributed immensely on the financial position of Eskom. Of course, the first thing has to be the 2.2% price increase for 2017-18 against the inflation of 6%. That put a damper on the performance of Eskom. And Chair has already indicated that we will open up a discussion with NESA to express and highlight our own position and the challenges we're facing. And we feel that if we are open in our negotiations and discussions with them, we'll reach a point of equilibrium. The second challenge that is facing Eskom are the declining sales volumes. They have decreased by 1.9%. And of course, we all understand that while there's a lot of emphasis globally to be more globally or environmental aware, but that is not the only cause for that shift in South Africa. That shift is partly because of the challenges that people are facing due to our own operations as Eskom. The third issue, again, that we have to look into has been the increasing municipalities' arrears. That has increased by 33%, an increase in arrears from 9 billion to 12 billion. But what has broken the back of this camel, which is Eskom, has been three things that the chair touched on. It's a qualified audit report that we received. And that qualified audit report was primarily because of three things. Irregular expenditure, I want to highlight, is not fruitless and wasteful expenditure. It was irregular expenditure. And it talks about the leadership, because this could have been avoided. To account for the expenditure that you have incurred over the years is just a daily operational activity in a normal institution. The team that Khalid is working with has covered about 80% of this. The second issue is corporate governance, which has led, as I've already indicated, to liquidity issues. Let me give you a scenario so that you begin to understand how these two work together. And me and the chair will go to understand this on Sunday after the announcement on Saturday. Knowing the funders and the bankers and the investors, it was very easy to talk to Andre, who's our treasurer, group treasurer at Eskom, and request that we be given the list of the key funders of Eskom. Of course, we're given that list, and we're happy that these are the people that we know. So we formed. We are now in Eskom, and we think you are aware that we have a new board, and there will be interim, and we will request that you help us on liquidity. All four of them, the first group we spoke about, were reading from the same song sheet. They said, congratulations on this appointment. And they said, we like what is happening. We've been arguing and trying to raise this for so many times with government. And they say, unfortunately, we are not in a position to discuss with you the funding unless you deal with the elephants in these rooms that you have, corruption. Once you have dealt with these things, and you have proven to us that you are capable of doing that, then we would be willing to engage and discuss with you your funding mix. Of course, the board meeting took place and these issues were discussed. And the decisions that were made was we needed to deal with this as speedily as possible. The question I've been asking myself is whether we could have done things differently if we're not under pressure. But having had the privilege of attending 2 board meetings, I've noticed that when people came there, they put South Africa first. We could have done exactly the same thing. And because of that, as Chair has already indicated, the engagement on this 20 billion started. And we've been engaging with these financial institutions for some time. And we are confident that we will have 20 billion in our account. Now, again, back on the leadership. We have already spoken about this thing. The board was there, I was interim, and the board, as the chair has already indicated, has prioritized this. That is the appointment of the CFO and the CEO. And the allegations, all those that are facing allegations will deal with. However, I spoke to 400 senior management of Eskom yesterday. And I was trying to highlight that when we talk about leadership, we are not talking only about people from above. And when we are talking governance, we are not talking policies. And when we're talking about the balance sheet, we are not talking about recapitalization only. Let me tell you what I discussed with them. I felt that leadership is not just about the appointment of the board. That the shareholder is done. And leadership is not about the board through the concurrence of the land ministry appointing the CEO. It's not. It's more than that. And it is also not about the EXCO that gets appointed by the CEO. But it's about the ability of the leadership of the institution creating an environment that allows everyone who has seen something to raise their hand and say, this is what I've seen, and I'm reporting. It is about the culture that is created where the staff members, irrespective of their levels in the institution, are given a space to raise their hand and say, so-and-so can't be in the corporate, in the EXCO team, because she lacks credibility. That is the kind of a culture that we want to build. And we're far from it at this moment in time, but we are going to work on that so that each and every member of Eskom feels that they have a space to add their value in ensuring that this institution achieves what it seeks to achieve. Governance. Governance is not about policies. You know, Eskom, I read some of the policies. They are very good. It's not about control systems. It's about people that you have there. It's about how they engage with other people. It's the willingness of the people to see beyond what is good for them, but is good for the organization, which is good for the country. And they have highlighted, I got 3 emails from some of the people that are working in Eskom, and they felt that some of the things that could help us whistleblow more than what we are doing will be if the whistleblowing is not managed internally, it goes outside. They felt that they will then be free to do so. Those are some of the things that we'll look into. There's been a lot of noise that we need to do the asset auditing of the 3 layers or 2 layers below me. Those are things that we have to do. But we are beginning to see people talking. In the same way that the people I met yesterday were part of the team that signed that letter that went to the president, the deputy president, that highlighted some of the challenges they are facing. So governance is not a policy, it becomes part of the culture, and that's what we'll try to do. Then the balance sheet and capital structure. Normally in the SOEs, when people talk balance sheet or capital structure, they assume the injection or capitalization by government. But the balance sheet or capital structure is more than that. It talks about the equity, as I've already indicated. An institution that is sitting with this debt is not sustainable. If you're looking at the gearing ratio of Eskom, it's 72%, which therefore means that if you can continuously make losses of about 10% over the next 4 or 5 years, the institution will be in real trouble. Hence the need of converting some of this debt into equity. Now, we can talk to government. There are other government entities like ITC, DBSA, and PIC that we can enter some negotiations and discussions to review the balance sheet. But these are things that we have to think about as we move forward. But importantly for staff members is that the equity side of business or of the balance sheet also includes the ends. So we have to make sure that on the one side we reduce the cost of doing business, and on the other side we maximize the return. That's a strategy that we have to endorse. Then touching on the operational performance, as I've already indicated. Generation plant availability. We're sitting comfortably at 83.2%. Eskom had targeted 80% by 2020. However, let me highlight that this will decrease because we'll be going through the maintenance. But again, it just shows that on the operational side, Eskom is an institution that is worth noticing. The transmission system minutes lost. And again, it's another achievement. In the 3 months time, 3 months under review, as end of September, it was 1 minute 04. From the history where we were coming from, that is an achievement. So, just looking at this, you put the distribution again in network interaction. You see that there are people who are really giving the best shot in ensuring that we do receive the power or the energy that we do. But because along the way we lost sight of what is core on the business, that is not covered. So the board has a responsibility in one, ensuring that those people that are waking up every day doing the best they could are recognized, and we thank them, and the chair has already done so. But over and above that, we create a kind of environment that will encourage them to add even more. Hence, I am confident that Eskom can turn the corner. If this was not here, I would be worried. So I begin to see that the challenges that Eskom is facing are less about core operational issues, but more about individuals who are after certain things that are outside of a mandate, who we can deal with it as soon as possible. That is what I've observed since I've been at Eskom. Households that have been electrified in the space of 6 months, more than 100,000. Kusile Unit 1 and Medupi Unit 4, what are they putting? 1,594 megawatts. Let me just highlight, Ghana has 2,000 megawatts. We, in the space, have added 1,594. Transmission lines, 350 kilometers. These are people who ignore what is in the media, that continuously do their work. So if we create that kind of environment, that will entice these people to put even more value. Can you imagine where Eskom will be? Still on the overview. The generation, I think I went back, huh? Sorry. Yeah. Environment performance, as you can see. Whereas last year we were sitting at 0.29 of the megawatt hour sent out. I was told about this yesterday. I'm still trying to find out. But every hour we determine, we calculate the sent out on the megawatts, which has decreased from 0.25, from 0.29 to 0.25. And also the water usage, you'll see, is coming down. The lost time injury rate, again, is improving. But unfortunately, and regrettable, Eskom suffered 2 employee fatalities and 5 contractors. The story on the BE is promising, 71% spent, and suppliers is 38.9. I think we can still do more on the suppliers. Female employees in senior management position is sitting at 36.9. Now, so what are we saying? What I'm saying is what the chair has already alluded on. If you think I'm repeating what he's saying, apologies, but I'll say it from a different perspective. What we need to do is to go out to these 47,000 people and show a degree of appreciation and tell them that the future is bright. That is important. But for those that in this process have been found wanting, they have to be out of Eskom as soon as possible. We need further engagement with our investors and funders. We need to build credibility. Credibility is less, it's something you acquire, you build over it. As I've already indicated, that the first engagement was, yes, we know you guys, that's fine. But before we can start talking, we want to see what we can do. We're going to try to engage with you, to give you a plan of what we seek to do. And on a quarterly basis, we'll come and report the progress achieved. That is the medium. We need to enhance our operational efficiencies, as I've already indicated. We need to have an appropriate cost-revenue mix. Right now, our cost is very high. And when you see the CFO presenting, you will note that the financial ratios have taken a dip. Whether you're looking at the revenue ratio, you're looking at EBITDA, we are looking at cash from operating activities, or we are also looking at primary energy costs. If we pay particular attention on this thing, then this place, within a short space of time, will see a change. I do have an appreciation of the fact that the restructuring of the capital structure is not something we can do in 2 or 3 months' time. But the board has articulated clear to me that these are some of the priorities. So as we do the cleanup, as we stabilize the institution through revenue and cost matching, we will be working on the capital structure. We have already said that government guarantees, while helpful, are no longer sufficient for an institution that is sitting at 72%. But to go and request recapitalization without any other option is not the best option. So we will sit, we will look at all options as I've already indicated, and we are already talking about those, and we'll come up with what we think is best. Now, the CFO then will come and present the financial performance. I would like you to have this at the back of your mind, what I tried to highlight, that what he's presenting is an outcome, a product, the result of an operating model that's, while not so efficient, but is satisfactory against the key challenges that we are facing. And that if we can deal with these key challenges, then Eskom would be in a totally different game. And please, Khalid, please.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen, Chairman, Chief Executive, members of the board, Eskom management staff, and media. I think the Chairman and Fakamani have set the tone of what I'm going to say, and I will highlight some of those factors and what does it mean. But I think the first thing, if I look at the financials, and the one question that I know you're going to ask is, why the delay in the financials from submitting in December to releasing now? So when Eskom prepared its financials in terms of the interim results, in terms of the numbers and the normal process of the review undertaken by the auditors, in terms of IFRS, there wasn't a problem in getting the numbers done. Obviously, one of the factors that are taken into account when we release financials is what is the outlook beyond the date on which you're releasing, and that 12 to 18 month view around the going concern. And a function of that is, what are the revenues are you projecting as Eskom for the financial year, not the year we're talking about, the FY 18-19, on which Eskom had applied for a 19.9% revenue application
in which we received a 5.23. So once that decision came out, Eskom had to assess the impact of that decision by the regulator on its operations, but more importantly, its financial sustainability going forward beyond the date in which we're talking about today, which is 30th of September 2017. And the discussions effectively and the concern correctly raised by the auditors is Eskom a going concern with a 5.23% price increase? And effectively, the auditors said, if you release your results as Eskom without getting the necessary support from government that we feel is a plan that you can deliver and execute on, you can release it, but there will be a qualification. And we understand the implications of a qualification with Eskom's debt sitting at 367 billion and a large component of that guaranteed by government. And effectively it led to the engagements and intervention between Eskom, our shareholder, National Treasury, around how do we come up with a plan that will give comfort to the auditors around our going concern on the back of a 5.23% decision by the regulator. What you will see when the results are released in detail, where we are is the auditors are saying they are not convinced we're completely out of the woods. We've got an unqualified review. It's not an audit at this point in time, but there's an emphasis of matter which cautions users of this financials around Eskom's ability to meet its requirements when they become due going forward. So that is the challenge that the chairman and the chief executive are speaking about. So we've got an emphasis of matter which says, yes, these are our concerns around the going concerns, and there's many assumptions and factors that are disclosed in that note. Effectively, what we need to ensure as the board and the executive is to deliver on that plan, to ensure when we release our financials come July this year, it'll be on the basis that one, we've dealt with the irregular expenditures and the qualification around that from March 2017, and that's more process related around completeness, around contract management, documentation management. And I have a slide on that where we're comfortable, that's under control, and we'll deliver on that. The big challenge is then ensuring that through rectifying the governance issues and the mismanagement issues, we are in a comfortable position to go into the markets and get access to funding, not only locally, but also internationally, to meet our requirements going forward. Because Eskom's capital expenditure doesn't stop at the end of March. We need to complete our new build. We need to maintain the existing generation and the networks, and that requires on average about 50 billion rand of capital expenditure. If we don't have cash from operations that can fund that capital expenditure, Eskom effectively borrows 100% to fund that capital expenditure. You will see when I highlight the results, what is our cash from operations doing, what does it cover, and how much does it contribute to our investing activities. So I think the first point I want to highlight, yes, we've released the results, but there is a note on the emphasis of matter around our going concern status, which we must continually focus on. In terms of the numbers itself, we're working, as we said, 2.2% price increase for this year, and the reduction in volumes of 1.9 literally neutralizes the increase out. So you see that the revenue amounts year on year remains literally flat. What Eskom has managed to do in this first 6 months of the year is try to minimize the cost escalations and cost containment to ensure that on an EBITDA perspective, we remain very close to what we reported in the last financial year in terms of September 2016. That's why you will see that the EBITDA on a rand basis has dropped marginally from 32 billion to 30 billion rand for September on September. However, when we go to the bottom line and net profits, as we commission more stations, we'll have to then release more depreciation to our income statement, and it means you have to capitalize this because you've now commissioned these plants, and then we see that the finance cost is also increasing. So from a bottom line perspective, in terms of your profits, year on year we see a drop from 10 billion to 6 billion, and the key is, in terms of all the key financial ratios, it's substantially linked to how much did you generate from cash from operations. Because those are the key ratios that lenders and the rating agencies look at. And you will see that our cash from operations has dropped by 10 billion compared to what we disclosed at the end of the last September results and interim. So moving on, what does this all mean? It does mean if your cash from operations drop significantly and your debt has increased, it only means one thing in terms of the key ratios that are covering your debt service commitments. They are trending negatively. And that's the information that lenders, rating agencies look at, as well as the auditors. They believe that it's not at the levels where it should be to give comfort, and I think that's the key reason, one of the key reasons why Moody's has downgraded Eskom last week Friday. So if we move to these ratios, this is what has happened in terms of revenue. You can see a slight drop. As I said, it's literally cancelled out between the drop in volumes and the price increase. Your EBITDA has dropped by the 2 billion, which in percentage terms is 6.8%. But the challenge for Eskom, what has happened to the cash from operations? And that's a function of two elements. What has happened on the income statement with regard to the drop in profits of 4 billion year on year, but the other big component being the change and deterioration in your working capital, substantially linked to the growth in our rear debts linked to the municipalities. It has resulted in that drop in cash from operations. In terms of primary energy, you will see that year on year the cost escalation in total primary energy, including IPPs, has only been 2%. We believe that is a focus area and it's delivering the necessary cost containments, but we will remain focused in terms of that element. And then the financial ratios, as I said, they all deteriorate in terms of compared to last year. For example, cash interest cover down from 2.7 to 1.5, and similarly your gross debt to EBITDA is deteriorated from 12 to 14.1. And as Pakamani has said, if you look at where your gearing ratio is, it's reflecting close to 70% as at September 2017. So I think in terms of the financials and the key ratios, it's all a matter of cash from operations. And yes, Eskom must look to extract whatever efficiencies it can on its cost base. But we can't ignore the fact that the other element that contributes to cash from operations is your revenue stream. And that is a function of two elements, what the volumes are and what the tariff is. And if that's not at an appropriate level in terms of the tariff, that cash from operations is not going to be sufficient to sustain Eskom with a debt that currently sits at 367 billion rand in terms of our balance sheet. So here's the income statement year on year, and you'll see substantially, if you look at the amounts, it hasn't really moved both on revenue, as I explained why, and if you look at our cost base, primary energy just up, that's a rounding number in terms of 2 billion rand in the year on year. That's a 2% change, but a 1 billion change. Employee costs are down 1 billion rand, and your operating costs remain relatively flat. And then you see the slight change in depreciation linked to the commissioning of the new build as they come online. And then you see the drop in net profit for the year. And you will remember that Eskom makes its bottom line profits, and it does much better in terms of performance for the first 6 months because of the cyclical nature of the organization. you have higher tariffs in winter, you generally have more volumes in the first 6 months of the year. Whereas in the second 6 months of the year, you generally lose money in terms of your income statement. So Eskom will be striving very hard to get to a break-even come March 2018, and it's not going to be easy if you look at where the volumes are and the challenges that face us over the next 2 months. In terms of sales, so where has the decline come from? In terms of redistributors, a minus 3.5% drop. In total, 2 terawatt hours. And from a redistributor perspective, we're looking at warmer weather conditions in terms of winter, as well as switching to much more efficient uses of electricity. We've also seen that the much better rainfall in the region has meant that in terms of supplying cross-border, we have seen a reduction in cross-border sales. However, on the positive side, you can see on the agricultural sector, that has grown by 4.6%. If I now move on and touch on primary energy, because it is a big component of our cost base. So what has happened in terms of that 1 billion increase year on year? You will see coal has gone up 1.4 billion. In terms of IPPs, we've underspent compared to the previous year. I think it's more volume related. We literally haven't run our OCGTs in the first 6 months of the year. And the coal escalation, despite being 1.4 billion year on year, if you look at the percentage growth in terms of rand per ton, year on year, we've seen that tracking inflation, which is far lower than the historic trend of around 15% in terms of coal costs. In terms of renewable IPPs, we've seen that the average is 205 cents, reflected in a downward trend compared to last year of 218 cents per kilowatt. So that's from a primary energy perspective. I believe that Eskom is doing a lot to maintain that and keep that as definitely below inflation. But there are challenges, and we just got to continuously focus on those areas. The financial position, this basically comes down to the assets have grown in terms of the capital expenditure that we've incurred, and effectively what that financial position reflects is how was that growth in capital expenditure funded during this period from Eskom. And what you will see there is that firstly, your debt has grown by about 34 billion to deal with the 59 billion rand growth in property, plant and equipment. And in the other component, you will see the reduction in liquid assets. So effectively, we said, whatever we spent on CapEx, because of the funding constraints, we used whatever we could borrow, but the other element was cash that you have available, we have utilized a lot of that. And you will see that that's the impact in terms of your cash balance and where we stand in terms of the challenges of liquidity and the concerns around going concern going forward. The rest of the items remain fairly consistent with the previous year. And then if I just reflect a summary of your cash flow statement, that's what we're talking about. The cash from operations has dropped by 30%, by 10 billion linked to one, what's happening on the income statement, and two, the arrear debt substantially growing on the municipal side. And then you will see that we had to repay a bit more debt than what we did in the last financial year, as well as your interest costs going up as your debt escalates. You can see the investing activities have literally remained flat year on year, and the financing activities haven't moved. So from a pure cash movement perspective, you see that deterioration of a net 14 billion rand movement from a cash perspective. If I just touch on our capital expenditure as a total, it's fairly consistent with what we do on an annual basis, around 25 billion per annum, slight drop in this window of September 2017 compared to September 2016. And what you want to also highlight here is that if you see the costs that we've incurred to date, especially around Kusile and Madupi, a significant amount has already been incurred, and then what must still be completed to fulfill these both programs. We were asked a lot of questions during the public hearings around stopping of these Madupi and Kusile in particular, and we just want to highlight again, firstly, we have many contracts. Stopping these projects would mean penalties in terms of the contractors, but we still have to meet the requirements of supply and demand. Now, if we decide to stop, for example, Kusile, it'll mean make sure that your other plants have the necessary capital refurbishments to meet the demands as we go into the future. I think another important element one must not underestimate. The thermal efficiencies of these new plants are far better than the older plants, and they have better environmental performance than our older plant, as well as our water usages. Currently, we are projecting, in terms of our latest approved limits, to be within those for cost of completion. This is a challenge. We talk about liquidity, and it's not an easy thing to fix. Total debt, we've touched on the municipals that have grown by 9 to 12 billion. Soweto has grown by 500 million. But in total, we see an overdue debt of 19 billion rand. And we talk about liquidity challenge. Now the challenge for Eskom is, if we could collect even half of that, it makes a big difference to our liquidity position and the concerns raised by many stakeholders out there. You will also see that under other customers, there's 657 million rand. That's linked to some of our cross-border customers that are overdue. So we've seen that in total, the growth is 3 billion, and we do see that substantially we need to address from a country perspective, how do you get your municipalities to pay their accounts? We can't be supplying where we find low margins on our income statements and the customers not paying us for our product. That is unsustainable in any business. Funding, as I said, initially we started with a funding plan for this financial year of 78 billion rand. We've reduced it during the year to 55 billion. To date, following the qualification of the audit, the governance issues, etc., we've already got committed 29 billion. And effectively, if you do your maths, 29 compared to that 55 is very close to this 20 billion that we're talking about in terms of dealing with our liquidity challenges. So that's what we need to address, and we're confident that the support of the financial institutions will help us overcome this. But when they're lending us the money, they want to know from Eskom, how am I going to get back my interest and my maturity? Show me your cash from operations that gives me comfort that you can meet these commitments when they become due. And that's the dilemma and the issue we need to address. Deal with your efficiencies at Eskom, but also deal with the remaining component of the cash from operations, that revenue line, and the components of volume as well as an appropriate tariff. In terms of, although when we do the review, the auditors don't focus on the PFMA stuff, we have got approval of a recovery plan which we report back on a monthly basis to our executive committee as well as the board audit on risk on how we're doing. And this is just to highlight what is Eskom doing in terms of the last finding. We're basically reviewing all our commercial contracts. We have 160 contracts that are over $1 billion. We've reviewed 80% of them, and the remaining contracts under R1 billion, we've reviewed also 80% of them. In terms of emergency procurement, we made a decision that only group execs can approve that, and we're comfortable that the strides we've made thus far will demonstrate to the auditors at year-end that the completeness around irregular expenditures is fulfilled, and we can disclose an amount with comfort. The qualification is not about the amount in the financials. It's about Eskom providing the auditors with sufficient processes that when we say the amount is, for example, 5 billion, auditors have no concern around the amount being 10 billion because of the processes and checks and balances that we have in place. And I just want to reiterate again what the Chief Exec said. Irregular expenditures does not necessarily mean fruitless and wasteful. For example, one of the elements disclosed in the last financials was around foreign suppliers having the necessary tax certificates. So just because we didn't have the necessary tax certificates, all that expenditure incurred against those suppliers is disclosed as irregular. Doesn't mean it's fruitless and wasteful. So those are the processes and documentation that Eskom is putting in place to address this. For me personally, I'm confident we will deal with this, and we'll convince the auditors and convince the board and the executive. Our bigger challenge is when we get to the year end, let's convince the auditors that Eskom remains a going concern going forward. And we move the emphasis of matter to a clean audit around that assertion. So in conclusion, from a financial perspective, I think operationally we continue to do what we have to do. We need to meet supply and demand, continue delivering on our build program. The board is addressing the governance issues at the top, and that positive actions by the board has meant that the financial institutions are around the table and are talking to Eskom and are part of the solution as we go forward. In the longer term, we'll talk about the capital structure. But I want to conclude, and I think Pakamani has said this. Yes, Eskom must address its efficient cost base. But if you look at the gap that we talk about on an annual basis, can Eskom reduce its cost to that element and be sustainable without affecting operations? And we cannot continue to keep on borrowing if we can't stand in front of a lender and honestly tell him, I can meet your commitments when it becomes due. And at the end of the day, we've got to also look at what is an appropriate level of tariff that keeps the organization sustainable, taking into account the challenges that the economy is facing. It's not an easy answer, but at the end of the day, we do have a weak balance sheet, we have weak financial ratios. We don't want to get into a situation where we find ourselves a few months down the line literally facing a similar dilemma, not only for Eskom, but for the country and the economy. Thank you.
Thank you, leadership. It's now the question and answer session, which is where you are going to be given a chance to maybe get some clarity, or if you have pressing questions that you would like to ask from the team on the podium. But we also have senior managers and executives also on the floor, so you will get, I'm sure, all the questions answered. We will start on the left. We will start with Karen. And then I see Carol from For now, we look at Siponati. So if you don't mind, I'll limit myself to the first three. And hopefully everyone, if you can, maybe just ask 3 questions at a time. Maximum, you don't have to go to 3. And then we'll take it from there. We'll start with Karen, and then Carol, and then Siponati.
I don't know if this is on or not.
Yes, okay, sure. Should be good.
Oh yeah, it's working. Thank you very much. Karen on from EMCA. Mr. Buser, you began by speaking about defining the roles between the minister or the executive and the board. I would just like further clarity on that. Mr. Kadebe, you spoke about how the kind of financial situation Eskom finds itself is the consequence of poor leadership. Do you include the leadership of Minister Lynn Brown in that? Because obviously there is an assertion that she has failed to exercise due oversight in terms of her role. And then finally, you had an extraordinary situation where the former CEO came to later validating that R1 billion contract that was given to McKinsey a few days after it emerged that the asset forfeiture unit had in fact obtained a preservation order, making allegations, very serious allegations of blatant criminality in that. Is there any suspicion on your part that his actions, which he says were done on behalf of the board, were an attempt to thwart that asset forfeiture unit process? And do you believe the board there's any kind of allegation or suggestion that the former board was complicit in an attempt to protect those responsible for the criminality that AFU says happened from some form of prosecution? Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Carol?
Yes.
Right at the front there. Thank you.
Hi, it's Carol Bailey from firstly, when Anderson was here 6-7 months ago presenting the annual results, he showed us that cash from operations had improved, and this was his argument as to why Eskom was not in trouble and why it was actually doing well. And can you explain how did that deteriorate so fast? And do you think that, looking back now at those annual financial statements, were those annual financial statements accurate? And then secondly, on the NERSA issue, to Mr. Kadebe, it seems to be saying that, NERSA is solved in the problems, but every single time Eskom goes to NERSA, NERSA says we're not efficient, therefore we're not going to give your tariff increase. So is NERSA being unfair to Eskom? And then thirdly, just on the equity, the conversion of some of your debt to equity, do you have any indication from the shareholder as to whether that's would be something they would go for, and how quickly would you be able to move on that?
Thank you, Carol. Siponati Mokelian, 3 questions.
Mr. Mabuza, well begun is half done. So, good on you, sir, and congratulations on a good start. May you sustain it. My questions first go to Mr. Karim on the finances. You only paid 10 billion rand in interest for debt finance. Surely that's too low for the levels of debt you have. And in that income statement you have 9 billion rand listed as other expenses. Can you shed some light on that? On the debt and securities outstanding of 367, you add another 124 billion rand, and you say that's other liabilities. Who is that owed to and what is it? Mr. Mabuza and Mr. Katere, now that you have gotten rid of the rotten apples at the top, are you going to follow that up with an audit, a lifestyle audit of the senior management of Eskom? I'm talking about the 300 plus people that lead this organization, because I'm sure you also are aware that it's not only those that have been fired or resigned that are possibly guilty of the corruption. And when may you find a solution to this debt problem or the interest problem that is sucking out of cash? Thank you.
Thank you, Sikonati. To check, and then you will assign to.
Do you want me to come there? Thank you. Not yet been to a parliamentary hearing, so I'm not used to pressing these gadgets. I guess I need to learn first. Thank you very much. Karen, I know no other way in a business, in an enterprise, either than appreciating that shareholders have the money, they have the decision, they choose where to invest their money. This is after they've done an exercise knowing that they can get better return elsewhere. And they've already concluded that somebody can yield better return than they can for themselves. So I know no other model either than that. So the shareholder has long decided to want to invest in Eskom. But I also know that I can't choose shareholders, but they choose a board. Once they've chosen the board, that's where the start of the debate begins. That's where the debate starts as to who acts in the best interest of the company. And it must be the board. The shareholder must act in the best interest of the shareholder. So that would already start to suggest there are going to be some issues of difference. We have one shareholder. We also then, knowing that we as a board can only set governance, set approved strategy, get management that would show us how they can deliver on that strategy, give us their business plan and their budgets, and then break them down, and then we hold them accountable to that. Just in the framework of the roles between the board and management, I am very clear that my role at Eskom and that of the board, we have nothing to do with customers. We have nothing to do with suppliers. We have nothing to do with staff. I don't employ, I don't procure, I don't sell, I don't collect debts. Mine is to make sure that there are processes and systems and capabilities in the organization to sell what we produce, collect what we sold, bank what we have collected. Use that money to pay the shareholder if there's a dividend and pay the providers of debt. So part of what we had to agree on, and I think we're in agreement with the shareholder representative on this point, as to where is the shareholder stops after having given me the mandate and they told me what are the hurdle rates they want. Mine is to then find the management that can be sure that it can do the things that are right, selling power, generate power in terms of our mandate, and sell it in a reliable and a cost-effective way. So that's where Pagamani and his executives have to start. So this role delineation was more to ensure that we are clear about this point up front. That is in no way saying the shareholder cannot give me instruction. That is in no way that the shareholder cannot set me policy. That is in no way saying the shareholder cannot hold me accountable. But the shareholder cannot ask me to come and do this thing and do it themselves. Maybe let's deal with Karen, unless you want me to respond to all those that were related to me, or we deal with Karen and then can move to Carol and then Skonat. Right. Right. I think, I would ask Caleb to answer these questions on the 10 billion interest, the 9 billion other, and the 367 billion plus the other liabilities, just to explain this. Before you do that, I think what Paramani is saying is part of what we have to do is really recognizing, like in any other business model, that you cannot be sustainable with this kind of gearing levels we have. It's not sustainable anywhere else. You have an EBITDA to your debt ratio of way over 10. Yeah. It's just not sustainable. Two, you cannot be in a business that relies on borrowings to cover consumables. So there is a need to have a discussion. Having done, we as a board want to refamiliarize ourselves with what the strategy of the company is. Hopefully we would find a resonance with that strategy. Sit with management, say, to deliver on this strategy, this is the kind of capital structure you need. This business belongs to the shareholder. It is the shareholder that must fund this business. Our role as the board and management is to identify in a detailed manner where the problems are and find and provide a solution to address them. None of that is to pay for this. We are not expected to pay for this. We're expected to bring a detailed analysis of what the problem with a detailed way of how we're going to resolve the problem. If the detailed problem analysis yields that your capital structure needs revisiting, we will be having a conversation with the shareholders. And lastly, for my part, just to deal with the NESA issue. I don't think, Carol, we think NESA is the panacea, tariffs is the panacea for our problems. That's part of the problem, that there is reliance on tariffs and on borrowings. We need to be saying, are we producing energy in a reliable and cost-efficient way that we can defend our pricing methodology and our pricing formula and paths? That's all what we're saying. But also, we do not think it is right to have a situation where your relationship with the regulator is one of acrimony. We don't have to be sweetheart with the regulator. However, we need to recognize they've got a duty to regulate us. We have a duty to let them know how best can we be regulated in terms of the regulations. But you need to have the ability to communicate and converse with the regulator. So we are not looking for NESA to just keep throwing money. We are very much aware. Disappointed about what they had asked for, but they're very much aware. We knew we were pushing water uphill. With such public opinion, to go and want 5 times inflation was just not going to be a reality. If there's any criticism, and it's easy for me to give it, was to even assume that it was possible to get that. So let's wait until December. So I'm just saying it's more the principle that you want to have a relationship that you can have these conversations. And yes, we do intend, Pagamani did speak to that Skonati, that we will go to levels below him, 2 or 3, how deep shall we go? But we will. We will go as we try and find out what else has happened that here is wrong. But we have every intention to find a clean, fresh eyes of looking at our challenges. But what we also offer, this leadership of Eskom must have transparency,
must have predictability, and must have consistency. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Karen, I'll start with you. Poor leadership, does it include the minister? Let me first talk about good leadership. Good leadership is how government, within a space of 2 weeks, when they decided that there was a need for an appropriate board and an interim CEO, when they decided, they took a decision. That is good leadership. The problem with that good leadership is that it took too long. If this had been done earlier, maybe we will not be facing the challenges we are facing now to quickly put the numbers and we want to have the financials completed. It's not about the Minister of Public Enterprise alone. It's about all the structures that have been created by the government that, for whatever reasons, could not come up with the decision that has led to me and him sitting here on the table. We have SCOPA, we have Public Enterprise Committee, we have the Economic Cluster of Ministers, we have the Line Ministry, which is a shareholder, we have the financial oversight through the National Treasury, we have the Finance Committee. These are all the committees that have been created to deal with this. I suppose, and I think we can use this Eskom incident as a case study of how we can avoid such a thing to happen again. So there's no one person responsible, there's a group of people that are responsible for this. And
Caleb, you want to continue?
Okay, then there's a question, Carol, you asked me
on Mackenzie and Sean.
Okay, I will take, Mackenzie. You know, it's a dubious, from the face value, you know, I think Chair will tell you, there's something abnormal about it. But what did the board do? The board did not sit and say, okay, this is a dubious transaction, okay, let's go home. They said, the board said, what is it that we know? And what is it that we do not know? And the conclusion was, let's do a thorough investigation on all those transactions that seem to be implicated when it comes to corporate governance issues. And that is what we're going to do. In fact, on the transaction we are talking about is already being investigated, but that's not the only transaction. We have a number of transactions that we have to look into, and the board is prioritizing that. But Chair, I think you can add, because we're chairing the meeting where the decision was made.
Yeah, with the one rider that in the nature of these things, they are now part of an investigation. We need to be a bit governed by that without being transparent or being opaque. I think we as a board, we always, and that's what I offer the minister, we always insist on accurate, timeous, and reliable information. And I guarantee that I will never get the minister surprised. Neither do I want to be surprised by management. So we get here, this is a matter of public record. Everybody is talking about McKinsey. I would argue that the first thing that we should be receiving, amongst other things from the acting CEO, is to tell us where these issues are at. And he did. What he told us, or what executive told us, was that McKinsey, we have sent a letter of demand. McKinsey is telling us they will not be paying this. We keep on sending the same letter. That's what we were told. We get here, we get a letter from McKinsey telling us you need to deal with this thing. Where is our money? Just so that you are clear, we told you that if a court found that what we have earned from your contract, we should not have been paid, we have to date put that money in some escrow. If the court finds that we should not have been paid that money, we will repay you that money. That's what we've all understood. But the more we're talking to executives, there is, and the understanding is not shared. But be that as it may, it's a matter that we know. I come from the public, but I know the asset forfeiture has taken a preservation order on that money. So nothing's going to happen to this. I was appointed on the 19th, announced on the 21st. He was appointed on the 22nd. We were here on the 22nd lunchtime. We asked the questions. We had a board meeting on the 24th. We asked this matter. We had legal in the room. Where, as we leave that board meeting, there's a statement in the media, apparently dated on the 16th of January, 3 days before we were appointed, announcing that no, you actually have been paid legitimately, you don't have to pay us back. The next paragraph, when are you paying the money? Now, if you understand that, I need your help. So what Pagamani says, this is just an example. So what do? We then say, okay, we're busy with other things. So Pagamani has met the acting CEO on this particular matter and has addressed the issue with this with the former acting CEO to say, this is what happened, this is what I read. This to me points to something that is missing, something that doesn't add up. So can you please tell me why I shouldn't suspend you and investigate this? That's where we are at. And so if you could just accept and appreciate that in its nature, I don't want to be sitting here and talking about an investigation that is currently underway. But I just wanted you to see where we are at as to, yeah, so there we are looking at what were the authorities, what were the decisions, and that's not an easy thing to find. Thank you.
Carol, it's the debt to equity. Do you have any interest from the shareholder? I think there's a recognition, an acknowledgement that the balance sheet as it currently stands is not sustainable. So we have to find a solution. But the solution is not just capital injection. That's what I was highlighting. That is not government providing that capital injection. So we'll be going back to shareholder and proposing some of the options that we think are available. As I've already made an example, that we have institutions like IDC, which is in the same sector, we have DBSA, we have PIC, we could see how we can craft those things. But it's one of those priorities that we're looking into. So it's not whether or not the balance sheet is appropriate, but it's how do we deal with the issue.
We're not looking at private sector participation.
It's still open, we're 7 days. So we're sitting in and we're looking at all those options. If it does make sense, we will look into that and we'll talk to the shareholder. I mean, we have gone through that. Telkom, Chair, you might help us on that as the Chair of Telkom. But it's something that is worth our while to look into. Yeah.
Caleb and Kulu will deal with Sikonati. You wanted to follow up, but Caleb, can we go to the numbers?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. First, Carol's question. Was the financials in March 2017 a fair reflection? I think 2 points I want to make. If you look at that point in time, what cash we had in the funding we were securing, and in terms of that going concern assumption, at the release of our last financials, we made an assumption of a 12% price decision that we would have got for the financial year, and that gave rise to the cash flows which reflects the going concern situation, And also at that point in time, you've secured a lot of funding. What has changed between 6 months ago and where we are now? I think the big one is firstly the qualification around the irregular expenditure, the issues that were reported around the reportable irregularities in the financials, around Mr. Koko, Mr. Molefe, etc. I think that also had an impact. And ultimately, the rest of the governance issues that have subsequently emerged has meant that funders were very uncomfortable up until effectively a week ago. So my opinion, yes, at that point, based on what has been achieved in the FY17 year, you raised money, the funders were at the table, made an assumption in terms of cash flows. I think it was a fair reflection, but I think you can ask the auditors. If I move to Sekanati's questions, firstly, he is correct on the interest, only 10 billion, and that's the point I'm trying to say. When you look at the income statement, don't only look at the interest on the income statement, you will see when we release the more detailed financials, go and read the cash flow statement. You will see the amount, there's another 5 billion of interest that's capitalized to the projects. Because the projects are not commissioned, it sits there. But on the cash flow statement, you see the full 15 billion rand. And if you think about the amount, 360 odd billion, you're already showing 15 billion for 6 months, multiply that by 2, quickly get to about a 30 billion number. But for me, I would start with the cash flow statement. And that's how you see the fair reflection of interest. With regard to other operating costs, that's effectively everything beyond employee costs. It means your maintenance costs that are incurred in the business, your insurance costs, your security, all your IT and other operating costs that sits in that 9 billion rand. Just that we didn't break it down in terms of the summary that is disclosed here. But it's effectively all your other operating costs. Getting back to the debt of 367 versus 400 billion, and Sekanati, again, look at the detailed financials. Substantially, that includes trade and payables, provisions for decommissioning, provisions for employee provisions in terms of post-retirement medical aid, deferred tax, etc., etc. But there's a lot of other liabilities that are disclosed on the detailed financials under liabilities that make up that 100 billion odd you will see. Thank you.
I see you have your hand up. So I wanted to clarify, but hopefully this is a directly seeking question. So if that is the one, then I'll ask you to ask only one question before I move to the side. So it will be you, obviously, with the directly question. So for now, I'm going to be on my right. I'm going to take Chris, I'm going to take Terence, and then I'll take Antoinette. I'll take
The only way to pour the perfect beer, this professional barman would tell you, is into a glass tilted at exactly 45 degrees. Oh, bless you.